but a lot of times the instinct is to see a Trump supporter and be like, ha, you voted for Trump. You got what you voted for. Now, I will point out, Trump is the one who said that. Trump said it for us. Trump is the one who said this for us. When it comes to someone like this is someone who is genuinely trying to just live on a day-to-day basis and get by, and Trump is making that harder. The thing that is so insane is that Democrats have been offering policies for decades that would help people exactly like this, that would help the average working class American, but I think Democrats at some point got too bogged down in certain types of messaging and lost the core message for people like Mary. People like Mary shouldn't feel disenfranchised by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was made for people like Mary. I don't know what got her to vote for Trump. I'm sure it was some sort of economic anxiety. But the point is, we should have a little bit of empathy for people like this, because we know damn well Trump would never have empathy. He just says you get what you voted for. And I know I said that earlier tongue in cheek, but I was basically quoting Donald Trump. And again, Moody's downgrades U.S. credit, citing rising debt. As this happens, Trump wakes up and goes on an all-caps Truth Social rant saying that Walmart should just eat the tariffs. Let's start here. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Saturday morning that Walmart should eat the tariffs instead of blaming the duties imposed by his admin on imported goods for the retailer's increased prices. His comments were in response to the world's largest retailer saying this week it would have to start raising prices later this month. They said Walmart shoppers to face price hikes as Trump tariffs hit. And Trump always views this as a hostile political act for some reason. Like when Amazon said about a month ago they may include the tariff fees when you check out, Trump said that was a hostile political act. And then Amazon said that they never even were going to do that in the first place. Trump said, quote, Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as the reason for raising prices. Tariffs are the reason. Between Walmart and China, they should just eat the tariffs. A rep for Walmart could not be reached, but Walmart CEO Doug McMillon said on Thursday the retailer could not absorb all the tariff costs because of narrow retail margins. Even so, he said, the company was committed to ensuring that tariff-related costs on general merchandise would not drive food prices higher. It shouldn't drive food prices higher, but Trump, for the businessman that he is, does not understand that CEOs and boards have a fiduciary duty to maximize profits. I'm not saying it should be that way. I'm not saying it ought to be that way, but I'm saying that it is that way in America. And when Trump is looking at these companies and asking them to not have a bigger profit margin, he's going against the very grain of the system he's benefited from. Again, this isn't me saying that Walmart should price gouge and that I love price gouging. I'm just saying, Trump, you can't only call out the price gouging when it is clearly linked back to your tariffs, right? It's an insane economic policy, as everything he does is. What about this? This is a big one. Moody's rating service on Friday said it is downgrading the U.S.'s creditworthiness in response to an increase in government debt over the past decade and rising interest payments, in a blow to the Trump admin that could push up borrowing costs. The downgrade, which puts the U.S. one notch below the highest credit rating, was, quote, driven mainly by increased interest payments and debt. You know, this line right here, it says this is a blow to the Trump administration. I think it's more of a blow to the American people rather than Trump admin, but I get what they're saying. The PR aspect of this will actually hurt Trump. You know Trump doesn't like to see this headline. Moody's message: the fiscal outlook has not improved since the firm put the federal government on notice in November of 2023 that it was at borrower risk. The announcement comes as Republicans are debating Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill that would extend 2017 tax cuts, with some hardline conservatives fighting to limit the increase to federal spending benefits. This is supposed to increase the deficit by $4 trillion. $4 trillion in spending, which is insane. Successive U.S. administrations and Congress have failed to agree on measures to reverse the trend of large annual fiscal deficits. And you know, I'm going to leave it at that. The Trump admin is not doing a good job, and you can tell. I mean, nothing gives me more confidence in my president than seeing him send out 5 or 6 all caps Truth Social posts while I'm still having my morning coffee. So drop a like, subscribe. If you made it this far in the video, I have 2 questions. Number 1, can you comment "Hi Adam" so I can see if you made it this far? I can see who the true OGs are. And number 2, make sure you like the video and subscribe. Love you all and peace out. All right, this is going to be an important.
The content that is making people this way. I think ultimately I'm a firm believer that if you solve a lot of the material problems, that you will be able to make it much easier to tackle some of this nascent reactionary sentiment. A lot of young men are vulnerable. They're getting worse and worse educational outcomes, and as a consequence of that, they're getting worse job outcomes. They're no longer seeing upward social mobility as a reality, and they have the exact same social and economic pressures that everybody else faces as well, in terms of no job prospects, never really owning a home, never really retiring. Like, that's not even a reality for many people at this point. And I think that creates a lot of anger, and especially if you're a young boy and you've grown up in a patriarchal society, you also have a built-in sense of entitlement that comes along with it. You see this a lot more in young white men in general, and a combination of all of those factors, I think, play a very significant role in the way that young men view the world and the anger that they feel. So I know I feel on this issue, but it comes from trying to fix some of these underlying societal problems that will help every single person. And then outside of that, you probably have to take a look at education, primary schooling and whatnot, and the curriculums and the way that we educate people, and maybe make some fixes if you want to tackle this issue. But I don't see any politician coming out and directly addressing that at all, and so I feel like the problem's only going to worsen. Damn, everybody has a question now.
Okay, the member that's putting their head up like that, yeah, you.
Hi, thank you very much. I thought it was interesting what you brought about with the growth of right-wing Europe movements in the West. I think the thing which distinguishes what's going on in the States from Europe is it's really centered around one person. The Republican Party is in many ways a Trump party, which begs the question, what happens to the Republican Party after Trump? The Republican Party is a strange coalition of very many different people, only really brought together by their love of this one person. So does the party split when he goes? Does it? Because a lot of these people really do not like each other. So I would be very interested to hear your view on what happens after. Thank you.
Someone said, by the way, please don't tell me you think education needs to be catered to boys like it already has been since education was invented. No, that's only one aspect of the problem. Enmity towards women is the exact same shit as blaming Jews for all of society's issues, or blaming black people for all of society's issues. You do that when you don't have a class-based political understanding of the world. You do that because you don't understand that it is actually capitalism that's fucking you over. It's not a woman that is responsible for your lack of safety and security in your future. Especially if we're talking about young men. What are young men worried about? Well, they're worried about the same shit that young women are worried about. But these guys, these right-wing manosphere podcasts, will take those concerns and anxieties and will reshift these young men's priorities and their attention back to women in general, within the confines of interpersonal communication with women, within the confines of feeling a sense of anger and resentment after, being denied a date or something. That's it. It's the same type of scapegoating that exists for trans people.
It's a really interesting question, especially because the Republican Party tried to recreate their own Trump with that was more controllable by the establishment, with a hyper focus on culture war, but also with, I guess, more of an intellectual veneer, but one that hyper focused on policy specifically. His name was Ron DeSantis. And that was an obvious failure. The more people heard about Ron DeSantis, the more they found out he was a goober and horrible to be around. Just really bad vibes in general. So I think that Donald Trump is, in a very similar way, Donald Trump is like, I say this jokingly, but Donald Trump is white man's Obama, where Barack Obama was incredibly charismatic. And with all of that talent, with his rhetorical skills, he was able to commit Americans to a campaign of hope and change, despite the fact that his governance was still very much the same, third-way neoliberalism, having Republicans in his cabinet, things that Kamala Harris also pushed for. And Democrats have tried to recreate that over and over again, and they have not succeeded. And I think the Republicans will fail in a similar fashion as well. So there is a real holistic problem within the Republican Party because they've leaned so much into the most insane parts of their base. And when I say like right-wing reaction, I mean literally insane, like QAnon, things like that. Like people who just like legitimately think vaccines make you gay and autistic. Like that is not sustainable. And so I don't know what will happen after Donald Trump leaves power, because I don't know if J.D. Vance will be another Ron DeSantis, or if he will actually be able to commit to, I don't know, whatever happens, whatever fascist future we are foreseeing for America. But I do think that there is a real crisis in the Republican Party as well. We saw that in the midterms, except instead of taking advantage of that crisis, the Democrats seemingly still found a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah, remember putting their card up right there with the glasses? Yeah, you, yes.
Is the card a flex?
No,
It's like, yo.
It's just easier to distinguish.
I was wondering if you saw the kind of viral tweet this week about the Cambridge PhD with the olfactory ethics of prose and all the kind of the anti.
Oh, she was in Cambridge?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
And it made me kind of think about fascist anti-intellectualism, and then kind of wider about the sort of place of universities in a wider leftist movement and going to university. I think that's kind of relevant for all of us. And I was just wondering if you had thoughts on that generally.
Yeah, that was so interesting because I think like the right-wing mind is so baby-brained in many ways because they think like, you know, what you're supposed to do at like an English lit PhD is talk about how sick the Odyssey is. Like that's what they think. And I saw a lot of people criticizing this person, being like, "Oh, why is this hyper niche, like hyper specific thing that you focused on for your dissertation?" It's like that's what you're supposed to do. Like, and I mean, in that intellectual examination, you end up uncovering certain truths that you never would have thought. And I see a broader problem with the way that the right looks at all matter of scientific inquiry. And it's very frustrating, and it's also very damaging when you have Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy talking about the Department of Government Efficiency, named after Dogecoin. I mean, it's idiocracy. Like, we literally are living in idiocracy world now. But one thing that they are constantly, like they've been constantly pointing to is, why are we spending, you know, $2 million on like raccoon piss? And it's like, yeah, you probably don't understand why the government is doing that, but like my immediate reaction to that isn't like, oh, these dumb woke scientists are doing that. Like, there's probably a reason for it. And then lo and behold, you find out like, no, there is actually a reason for it. It's like trying to figure out new methods of warding off predators without while using pheromones that are not necessarily dangerous to the environment, right? So this is really scary when you have these people that are in control of the funding mechanisms of the government, and their stupidity is going to, I think, shut off a lot of scientific research, and I'm very frustrated by that.
This is before Doge came into action, and of course, everything I predicted happened.
But I don't know where we go from here, really. I just hope that maybe maybe you'll jiggle some keys in front of them and their attention will focus on something else, hopefully. Because, yeah, God forbid, you let these guys run the show, I mean, it's gonna be awful. But it also, I mean, I guess is similar to Nazi Germany as well, where they were like very desperately trying to find, trying to dampen the way artistic expression worked, and they were like really hyper focused. They thought like modern art was degenerate, and they wanted to recreate more orthodox versions of art, and obviously that was a failure. So I think when there's a will, there's a way, and hopefully people will overcome these problems.
Idiocracy is a term I should use more. Remember here. This is the last question, I believe.
These questions, by the way, I don't know what he's gonna ask. Okay? These questions, I will admit, have been a lot more policy focused than the Cambridge ones were. I don't know what was going on. The Cambridge ones were literally like, I saw a YouTube video of you 5 years ago where you were making a joke that I'm taking seriously. Why did you say that? And I was like, I mean, it's a joke.
I did have some quotes I couldn't get to.
Oh, damn, you were ready.
I was ready, but I was like, I'll be nicer.
Someone honestly asked me, like, why do you think Crimea belongs to Turkey?
Wait, you got asked that at Cambridge?
Yes.
We are the better place.
That was, I mean, yeah, so far it's been great. I don't know what he's gonna do. Someone didn't even have a question. My last question at Cambridge was, why do you call yourself a socialist when you have a house?
Wait, that should be like a t-shirt quote.
I mean, yeah. I don't want to push back on any particular kind of one thing you've said, but as you've just alluded to, I think there are quite a few things that people kind of consistently bring up against you, which I think you say in jest, and kind of I see where it comes from. But do you think at times it's proved kind of damaging and kind of unconstructive with some of the things you've said in the past? Particularly people bring up kind of very popularly kind of what you might have said about 9/11 or October 7th.
Okay, that was the quote that I had.
Oh, you were gonna ask me about America deserved 9/11? I mean, so, no, you're right. I agree. I think it comes with the format for the most.
This is what they asked me in Chicago too, if you remember. And what's interesting about it is, like, I think in a way it's a little bit victim blaming, but they don't understand that because they don't know they don't understand how the sausage is made. Like, you guys are a little bit more locked in on how the sausage is made, so you see it every day, where the reasons as to why, like, it's virtually impossible for me to maintain this civil aesthetic posture for 8 to 10 hours every single day when talking about politics, right? And there are definitely opportunists who take advantage of that anger. There are opportunists who take advantage of that anger to basically do smears in the same way that they would for prominent politicians. There is, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say something that might piss people off, but I'm honestly shocked every day that I'm not canceled more frequently, given that I talk about politics every single day from a position that is not broadly represented in American media at all. Wild, because one thing that content creators always come to me and are in shock about is the fact that I talk for 8 hours in general, right? Content creators, if you ask them, will be like, there is no way I can do that. I will literally get myself canceled because I will say something that will be misconstrued. And that's not just about politics, that's just in general, right? Every single content creator, if you were to ask them, would they be able to maintain like an 8-hour fucking broadcast, would tell you, ain't no way, I will absolutely get canceled. It's not because they're illiterate, chatter. Some of them are, okay? But you're wrong. You would get fucking canceled too. If you think that you'd be able to yap about any issue without a chat even for 8 consecutive hours, you 100% are wrong. Now, add on to this equation. Yeah, it's human. It's in our capacity to make errors, endless amounts of errors in the process of free flow communication over 8 hours every day. Then add on to that the fact that I'm talking about politics. Then add on to that the fact that I'm talking about politics from a perspective or a framework that is not broadly represented by broadly recognizable to the overwhelming majority of Americans, or even, dare I say, considered to be hostile types of politics, because it's like inherently antagonistic to the pre-existing hierarchies that people take for granted under capitalism. Then on top of that, add on a bunch of ideological enemies from all different swaths of society who are intensely focused on trying to vilify me every step of the fucking way, basically gang stalking me. I think I do pretty well under this magnifying glass, all things considered, you know? And that's it. Part of the reason why it doesn't really work is that, and here's what this chatter said, and that's really funny. Not this chatter. This chatter, Yeet cancels you every day. Like, that's what I mean. There's like, I have stalkers and accounts dedicated to stalking me, content creators dedicated to stalking me, and communities that are dedicated to stalking me. You will regret this word. You will regret saying this. No, the point that I'm making is not inviting further scrutiny. I'm saying that I've already maxed out on scrutiny, and I choose my words very carefully. But in that regard, yes, there will be moments where I get fucking canceled. There will be moments where I come across as maybe a little too passionate, and no one really defends you. That's the other side of it. Part of the reason why most people don't even want to fucking defend me is, one, because I have my own community. I don't expect anyone to defend me either, because I understand that like no one has the capacity to fucking deal with like the level of insane stalker behavior that I have to engage with. It's a obsessive business, you know? Is smart to stream at times that Asmon is not on, so your political stream doesn't seem so small in viewership? It's all good, baby. I think it's a more damning indication of American politics and American political discourse on this platform than you think. I'm good though. Thanks though. Maybe when you start your own journey as a political commentator, you can choose to stream outside of the hours that me and Asmon stream at. You're right. People love Asmon and Hassan. The overlap is insane. So anyway, that's what I mean. Everyone understands it. Everyone understands like how fucking insane the format is. So of course, in this format, like there's gonna be kinks, there's gonna be issues, but I try to do my very best regardless. There was a TikTok comment on one of your videos saying how they didn't get why you would yell all the time until they actually tune into your broadcast frequently, and after 3 years they are surprised how calm you are and how you don't yell even more often. Yeah. Legion Miller acknowledged in a recent video about your detainment that you have a bunch of privileges and you still get so much hate. Why do people give Asmongold any credit? Because they are even stupider than the way Asmongold presents himself. I wouldn't necessarily say Asmongold is stupid. I don't think he's just very knowledgeable on politics. But there are people who are incredibly dumb, like much dumber than even the way Asmongold presents himself. So much so that they are like, oh yeah, I agree with this guy. This guy's a truth teller. That in and of itself is damning. It's damning for political discourse. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand what a horrible representation this is for political discourse in the United States of America in general, especially online, especially in independent media, that Asmongold and the way he presents himself, which is an incredibly dumb person, even though he's not so dumb. Asmon isn't stupid. You are without a doubt the most charitable person on this platform. No, he is not as stupid as he presents himself. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't matter. You can see this as a defense of Asmongold or not. I don't give a shit because I only care about his output. And his output is incredibly dumb and incredibly racist. But I don't think he truly cares about these issues that he speaks on. He's just simply performing to a crowd. It's his viewership is his views are overall aligned with a lot of the things that he talks about, for sure. And perhaps he's gotten more radicalized over the course of the past couple of years. But having said that, having said all of that, I think he still is nowhere near as dumb as he presents himself. So Tim Pool, I think, is dumber than even Asmongold. Tim Pool doesn't just present himself as a dumb person. I think he legitimately is a dumb person. Like, he's a bad person and he's dumb. Asmongold, I think, is bad and grifting, but not as dumb as Tim Pool is. That's what I believe. Now, obviously, none of this really matters. I was talking about, like, the way I carry myself and how damaging that might be to, like, the broader leftist movement. Now, the reason I take that in stride to the best of my ability, but I still try to explain my position here is because most people don't fucking understand what it's like to be a streamer. And I'm not doing a woe is me type situation. I'm like very privileged. I recognize that, right? But having said that, the format itself lends itself to being clipped out of context, and broader format of the internet overall is incredibly reactionary, incredibly angry towards any sort of like progressive politics. So as someone who defends all of these things that these guys want to undermine with regular frequency, I've become this like singular amalgamation of like all things socialism, communism, progressive, pro-trans, pro-women, all of this stuff. And it's a lot easier for many people to just like disparage me as a catch-all, to position themselves as like anti all of the things I represent, than to actually individually turn around and defend their idiotic positions on every single one of these issues piece by piece. It's a way for a lot of right-wingers to basically maintain like some semblance of like a political attitude while presenting themselves, while signaling themselves to the rest of the right as like one of them. That's it. And of course, most people don't understand that because they don't understand the environment. They don't understand the media environment, and they don't understand the way that like this kind of content exists. So they only see the impact of it. They only see the manufactured outrage of it, for example. And that's it. But I believe that anyone in my position would probably be in a similar set of circumstances, would probably have to deal with a similar set of circumstances. If it wasn't me, and if it was, I don't know, someone else who was like an out and about, avowed leftist, socialist, who had reached the level of success that I've reached, they would probably get attacked in a similar capacity as well. Look no further than an incredibly popular socialist politician, Bernie Sanders, and the ways in which he receives an endless sea of criticism. Those criticisms are almost identical to the criticism that I receive. They write articles about him fucking going on private jets and going on first-class flights every now and then. They wrote endless amounts of articles about how he has 3 homes. He owns 3 homes. Much of that was just a lie, right? But it didn't matter, or much of that was an exaggeration. I thought Bernie was generally adored. Yes. But the same can be said for me. Do you not understand? But you clip people out of context too. It's because you got clipped uncharitably that I found you. Hot takes happen, but you changed my life to be mutual aid focused, to help me be ready to help people after people's roofs got blown off yesterday by the NATO. Anyway, with Bernie, which I'm not comparing myself to. I mean, he's a fucking politician and a leader in this movement. I'm just some random Twitch streamer, but the overall like focused resentment is for the same exact purpose. It's to disparage and undermine the politics of the man, rather than actually tackling the policies of the man. And the same thing goes for myself. Do you see what I mean? So, like I said, it's just people don't understand why there's so much heated discourse in this, and what are the motivating reasons for said heated discourse. And they only see the end of the heated discourse. They see the impact of said heated discourse. And then they go, oh, why did you say this thing that pissed a lot of people off? Don't you feel like it's unproductive to piss a lot of people off? And to which it's going to be really hard for me to explain like the dynamic of online content creation and whatnot. But here it is. Let's watch.
Okay. Part, if we're going to be super serious about it, like I'm talking for 8 to 10 hours. Sometimes, you know, tensions get high, and I get emotional. I'm very passionate, and I say things that can be very easily misconstrued, right? Even the 9/11 quote is something that is virtually not even a point of contention in academic literature if you discuss it as a point of blowback. Like, if you meddle in the affairs of the world, inevitably the very same people that you propped up as brave mujahideen that were anti-Soviet warriors on the road to peace. That was the way that Osama bin Laden was featured in, I believe, 1993 on a famous Independent article. Yeah, those guys are gonna inevitably be like, I'm gonna use the training and the guns you gave me against you. And that was what I was talking about in that situation, but did not communicate it in the best ways possible. And especially with the clickbait culture that we now have, whenever I talk about complex, nuanced, and dense geopolitical issues.
Okay, never mind. I kind of cooked. I take it back. I was too harsh on myself. Oh, that boy was cooking. Low key, but high key. I mean, I basically explained everything I was telling you guys just now.
You can always make it, you can always cut it in a way where you can make it seem like I'm saying the exact opposite thing that I'm actually saying. But I think ultimately, the way I feel about it is like I would rather still maintain somewhat of a humorous nature, even if it's like gallows humor. Not saying that about the 9/11 thing, but just in general, you know, instances where I've like been clipped out of context or been taken seriously when I'm very obviously joking. I don't believe Crimea belongs to Turkey. Like in moments like that, I would rather continue doing my coverage in the way that I'm doing it and not to the naysayers and people who wish to try to stop me and smear me and cynically clip me out of context in an effort to try and censor me. I'd much rather continue doing it the way that I'm doing it because I feel like it would be very boring. There are a million content creators out there who engage in the dense subject matter with the academic tone that it deserves, right? I'm trying to make things more entertaining. I'm trying to make things more appealing. And I'm trying to educate people while also, you know, sometimes making them laugh or entertaining them. So that's my that's my primary focus. And if things get misconstrued along the way, then it is what it is, you know? There's not really much I can do about it.
So that was the last question. Thank you so much for coming. Everyone just please remain seated while my guest and I leave. But that's Hassan Piker. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Senator Ruben Gallego, or as we say in Argentina, Gallego, which is a less traditional pronunciation. Senator, it's so great to have you on. You know, I want to talk about the rule of law. I want to talk about habeas corpus, but maybe we could start a little bit with immigration because it's been such a topic and you're working so actively on it. Do you think there's an area in which Democrats in general are not striking the right tone on immigration insofar as connecting with voters, where the Democratic Party could be doing better?
Yeah, so I think your basic Democratic voter is actually more in line with your average American voter when it comes to immigration. But the one area that we don't actually talk about is border security. And if you talk to kind of your non-political Democrat, which they exist, they will tell you like, oh yeah, I really think we should have good border security, where we're trying to limit the amount as close to zero as possible, the amount of illegal entries, right? And if you talk to most Americans, they all agree with that. Where there's a disagreement is that we also believe that we need to fix the problem of people that have been here for many years in the shadows. And you know, this is where we're actually more in line with where the American public is, because our position is, listen, if you are a dreamer, you should be a citizen. If you're the spouse of an American citizen, you should have an opportunity to become a citizen. If you're here, maybe we should came here illegally, you should pay a fine and then give you a visa or a work permit, and so that way you're not deportable, but largely yet because you have such a presence in your community within your families. And if you look at where the Republicans are, they're trusted on border security, but they're not trusted on the immigration reform side, right? So what Democrats need to do is really capture the whole narrative and win the issue by making sure people understand we are just as good when it comes to border security as Republicans, but our position when it comes to actual humans and those that are stuck here in the shadows is more in line with what common sense Americans want.
I want to talk a little bit about asylum and the asylum process. The current president, I genuinely think, is confused between requesting asylum and insane asylums, also psychiatric facilities. For people who understand what we're talking about when we talk about asylum in the sense of people come to the border or are in the United States, do you think it should be easier or more difficult to qualify for asylum based on who we say should fit versus should not fit those claims?
So it's two things. Number one, I do think we need to change it to make it more difficult, because what we saw, and especially in Arizona, is that people were abusing the system to be able to come here ask for asylum, and then because of our broken system, they're here for 7 to 9 years before they even have an asylum case. And that's actually what encourages a lot of migration. And not just, by the way, the stereotype is just from, Mexico and Latin America. Now it's from all over the world.
Yeah.
And so you actually had tourist agencies in foreign countries that were advertising to get to the United States and explaining to these refugees how to basically abuse our system. So some of it is to make it more, to tighten it up, so people that are in fear and danger of their lives have an opportunity to be, to request asylum. Make it easier for people to request asylum in other ways besides going to the borders, because when that happens, it is very chaotic. You've seen what it actually looks like on TV. It's also very, very disturbing to the local economies in these border areas. So, this is what you have to kind of think about when we're thinking about that. And so what does a good asylum system look like? You should be able to request for asylum in, third-party countries. You should be able to request asylum, online. We should have more asylum judges that could actually be more helpful in terms of making decisions faster. Now, the other thing I think that's very key, and I could get a little nerdy this, the reason why we also had an explosion in asylum seekers is because our actual worker visa program system is screwed up, right? And so when we could potentially be bringing in legally a lot of these workers, where they would probably pay a fee to come work this country, go through a background check, work for a couple years, and things of that nature, instead of going through that route, they're going through the asylum route, because that is the only route. There is no guest worker program that can really meet the demand of what our economy needs. And so if you actually have a good guest worker program with a more sane asylum process, you'd see a lot of less people actually using that system.
It seems that there's a lot of inherent contradictions in some of what we're hearing right now on a lot of these issues. As you point out, when it comes to asylum and workers, et cetera, when we hear this, let's bring manufacturing back to the United States. And the reality is there's 500,000 unfilled manufacturing jobs right now in the United States. What are these contradictions things that privately your Republican colleagues will kind of acknowledge to you, or is it not something that they seem to be aware of?
Certainly some of them do, but who cares if they acknowledge it privately or not? It means, like, what are you doing if you're not putting pen to paper?
Yeah.
But that is a real thing. This president is trying to bring manufacturing back by raising tariffs on countries that are sending us their goods. Even if we bring those jobs back, we'd have to import a lot of the workers from the countries that we just cut probably tariff deals with, because fact is, like, we don't have that manpower. If you look back during the campaign, we heard about these Haitian refugees and asylum, Haitian residents at this point that had moved to Ohio. That's where, remember when they were eating the dogs and cats, supposedly, or that's the lie that the president said. The reason they moved to Hamilton, Ohio is because manufacturing had picked up and the local economy and the local labor force was not able to meet that demand. And so a lot of Haitians had heard from both recruiters and even their families that, like, they could move to, I think it's called Hamilton, Ohio, start a job, live a good decent life in a very nice, safe part of the state, and that there was demand for their work because the local workforce was not meeting the demand. So that is going to happen on a national level, and in some regards, that's not a bad thing. That's how you grow the economy. Right? If you want to talk about the future workforce, Americans just aren't having enough kids, right? So there's a lot of things we could do to help that. But in the short term, bringing in good qualified labor in certain sectors to make sure we don't undercut our U.S. labor could actually be very beneficial for this economy to grow.
If we zoom out a little bit and think about what happened in November 24 in general, and now looking at the midterms of 26 and further down the line in 28, there are two conflicting views to a degree in the political left. There's the view that trying to appease swing voters with watered down Republican light policies didn't work in 24, it's going to fail again. On the other hand, there's the view that the perception of the Democratic Party was too left, too woke, too progressive, sort of whatever.
Out of touch, I would say, more than anything else.
Or out of touch. Well, let me frame up the question as it pertains to you, because some folks wrote to me and they said, David, when Senator Gallego was on the show as congressman versus the way we see him operating now, voted for 10 of Trump's cabinet picks more than his colleagues in the Democratic Party, talking about making it a little harder to qualify for asylum. Is he making the mistake, maybe a former Senator Sinema, of drifting to the middle in a way that doesn't serve the party? Give us your assessment kind of where you are and where the party should be.
Well, there's a lot of difference between me and so number one, like I actually literally have town halls once a month. I'm not hiding from my constituents.
That's
or
a
the
key
Democratic
difference.
Party. Yeah. So when I'm out there, like when I'm out there and I put myself out there and you see me take these votes, like I hold myself accountable. And like I think you have to look at it in a couple of ways. Number one, when people are saying like, oh, you voted separately from all these other Democrats, Arizona is not the same as an East Coast or a lot of West Coast states. Let me give you a good example. Actually, before we got on, we were talking about the Navajo Nation, right? I was just in Pennsylvania a couple of days ago. 2% of the Pennsylvania land is owned and governed by the federal government. They have zero federally recognized tribes. Arizona has 22 federally recognized tribes, and 65 of our land is federal land. We're entirely dependent on the federal government making decisions about water coming down the Colorado River and what's going to happen to us in the future. In addition to, if you are, someone who cares about, minority communities, especially tribal nations, you need to make sure you have good relationships with the federal government for them, because if you don't have a responsive federal government, you'll see bad things happen on these tribal lands. So if you see a lot of what I vote for is because I need to take care of these very core Arizona issues. So if you're, a congressman from a New England state, you could really care less who the Secretary of the Interior is, because you will never call that person. I need to call the Department of Interior to help, one of these tribal nations out to make sure that we're getting our water from the Colorado River. And so, yes, I have an answer to the Democratic Party, but first I have to answer to who voted for me, which is the citizens of Arizona. Secondly, we also have to recognize as Democrats that things change. What has happened at the border is entirely different what happened 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. The migrations that came are totally different. And when we as Democrats don't look like we understand that things have changed and we're going to try to find solutions, we look like we're out of touch, right? So the asylum seekers that have been coming here for the last 4 years are entirely different than the asylum seekers that was designed under the current law, right? If we can't, as a party, admit that millions of people coming to the border, shutting down ports of entries, which causes a lot of business to decline on the border, which is they're entirely dependent on that type of business. And just the views of hundreds of thousands of people irregularly coming to the United States is going to impact us. Now, we could deny it to ourselves, and we could just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and then surprise, we keep on losing some of these states. Or we could understand that, there's a better way to do this. The American public and even the main baseline Democrat agrees that this needs to be done. And at the end of the day, we could actually win races. Or if not, we're going to be stuck in the same situation. And, there's a reason why I won Arizona and Trump won Arizona. We were both more in line with where the base voter was than the national party at that point. And I'll give you a good example.
Yeah.
Carrie Lake and I, when they polled us at the end, people trusted me more on border security immigration issues than Carrie Lake, but they trusted Donald Trump more on border security issues than Kamala Harris. And why is that? Because Carrie Lake's position was so extreme that even Donald Trump wasn't taking those positions. So we have to figure out a way to make this something that we are trusted for, or else we're just going to keep losing elections. If you want to keep losing elections, we can, but that has consequences, as we're seeing now.
When President Trump says, I'm doing so well on the border, crossings are down 99%, or he said, I think at one point he said 3 people cross, which seems like an implausible number. Number one, do you believe those numbers, or what numbers are you seeing? And number two, does Trump get credit for a reduction if indeed a reduction has taken place?
So I'm not sure like the 3, but the crossing is at an all-time low. It started though with Biden, and with Biden, by the way, when Biden tightened up the asylum restrictions and who can request asylum and quicker decisions,
yes,
we saw which everyone was very supportive of. All Democrats were very supportive when he did it. We saw those numbers started to dive quickly. The president came in and added more manpower at the border and continued it. So I think they both deserve credit. And I think illegal crossings are what we should try to minimize. Again, if you ask a normal American or just a normal Democrat, not one that goes to meetings, but someone that actually is just someone down the street and ask them, like, should we try to stop illegal immigrants from entering the country? The answer would likely be yes. Now, we could always have debate about how we do it. Here's the problem with where the president is doing it.
Yep.
He is bankrupting the whole system in the process of doing it. The DHS is spending and burning through money and then using it in a dumb way. They sent about 380 people to Guantanamo and had to bring most of them back, and that cost us alone $21 million, right? You're using the military to be on the border, which, number one, I think is just not what we as a country want to see. We want to see civilian policing. That's what we have always believed. So hiring more border patrol, and they're less expensive than the military. But you have these men and women at the border that are now not getting trained. They're not in their MOSs. They're not getting the technical trainings they're supposed to.
Right.
And again, it's all not sustainable in the long run if you keep doing it this way. So there is some credit to be given to the president, but this is not the way to do it because it's just not sustainable in the long run.
Senator, last thing I want to ask you about, I know you've got to run. On this issue of suspending habeas corpus, we've heard from Stephen Miller, advisor to the president, that this is something they are looking at on the basis that the immigration situation is an emergency and therefore it would be legally justified to suspend habeas corpus. Your colleague, Senator Barrasso, 3 times was asked over the weekend by Kirsten Welker, is that something that you think should happen? And he basically white flagged by saying, I don't believe it's going to come to a vote, which some legal experts said that's even more terrifying because it suggests that it's not even actually going to go through the proper channels.
You're giving powers to one man. It's
exactly.
Absolutely terrifying.
What are you thinking on this? What is the Democratic Party and Senate Democrats thinking about this?
Well, so how could you think about this? How could you be bragging about having the lowest crossings ever and then say, well, we also now have to suspend, habeas corpus, right? So it's not an invasion if you actually have control of the borders.
Right.
And number 2, we have to make sure this endangers everybody. Everybody. You're giving the power to one person to be able to say whether you're in this country here illegally or not, or that you could just be accused of a crime and you're not going before a judge. Will be no warrants. There's a reason why, by the way, this was actually put in the Constitution of the United States, because we saw, our founding fathers saw the abuse of this occurring, during the time of the American Revolution. So it is very dangerous. We are not going to just take this lightly at all. I think we're hoping that there is a public announcement that's not going to happen, but when it happens, and should it happen, I think it's important that we are very much ready to, I think, do what we can to push back as hard as we can, both here on the Senate side, anything internally we're going to be doing, and we'll look at every possible scenario, but also people going to the streets and protesting and for, constitutional rights. And I think we have to be very clear that this has nothing to do with illegal immigrants. It has nothing to do with whatever the president claiming is the threat. This has to do with protecting the Constitution of the United States and people's individual rights.
We've been speaking with Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego. Always a pleasure having you on. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Buenas, buenas.
On a video where I was duetting another creator who was saying that white women need to step in and intervene when ICE comes for our neighbors, that we have the ability as white women, privileged white women, to absolutely destroy the optics, to make ICE look terrible. We know that a certain segment of the US population doesn't care about brown people, unfortunately. They don't care about brown women, brown children. They don't care about our immigrant neighbors at all. The optics don't actually look that bad to them when ICE is coming for our neighbors who are not white. But the second the state is violent toward white women, the optics turn very quickly. We've actually seen a tremendous amount of sympathy for white women who have been dragged out of town halls simply for speaking up over the last few months. like far more sympathy from a certain segment of the population for those white women who were removed from town halls than for immigrant families who are being kidnapped by ICE, terrorized by ICE, families torn apart by ICE. People in communities all over this country trying to quietly live their lives who are being rounded up from their homes, from their work, who are being snatched off the street and disappeared. There's so much more sympathy for white women than for any of our brown neighbors, any of our migrant population. And, you know, I've said this in multiple other videos, and I think I also stitched a video with a white woman whisperer who had said this as well, that white women have a power here that we should be using. How can we use our white women's skills and our white woman privilege for good? We know that we are somewhat more protected than other populations, not as protected as white men. Okay, sorry, I had to press pause on that video. I'm actually out in North Portland now. So as I was saying, we have a measure of privilege. We are insulated to some degree, and that means that we have the opportunity to push back harder against this regime. One of the key elements of a successful resistance is that you do everything that you can to protect the most vulnerable, the folks who are being targeted by the regime. We do not abandon vulnerable groups to the cruelty of the Trump regime. We must consistently advocate for them. And so I definitely agree with the overall sentiment that that creator I was duetting was expressing. We need to use our privilege to get up to some good trouble and defend democracy and defend vulnerable groups that are being targeted by this regime. But that creator was kind of making it sound like if you see ICE come for your neighbors, that you like get in between them, that you like physically start shit. And I just want to remind folks that you want to be really careful that you, one, understand what the law is, and two, that you don't break it. This commenter said, they, meaning ICE, are armed. You could get shot and die. I don't think it's that easy. Meaning that the creator was making it sound like we're just going to step in and stop this shit. I mean, this is exactly what that creator was talking about in terms of privilege. I don't think ICE is going to shoot an unarmed white woman, especially not if her friends are there filming it. But I do agree, I don't think it's that easy. I feel very much the passion that that creator put forth. I feel her sense of urgency, the way she desperately wants to protect immigrants in her community. But we have got to be strategic. We have to know what we're doing. We have to be really savvy with our actions. We can't just act on impulse. We can't act because our emotions are really high. When we do take action, it needs to be effective. We need to achieve the desired result. And so, we really just can't go charging in if we see ICE come for our neighbors. What good is that going to do? I don't think that's going to get us shot. I think it's going to get us arrested and charged with a federal crime. And probably, I'm no attorney, but probably obstruction. Now, you might say, Angela, what about people who engage in civil disobedience and they are getting arrested on purpose? Yes, those are planned events. That is not something that happens spontaneously. Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's, who just got arrested for protesting in front of an RFK Senate hearing, that was planned. He knew he was going to get arrested. The other people who protested with him, they knew they were going to get arrested. Choosing to engage in civil disobedience is something that is pre-planned. You have it scripted out. You know your rights. You know how you're going to behave. You know that when you get arrested, you're not going to resist and risk up charges of additional felonies. You have secured your attorney in advance. You are prepared to pay bail. But you also make sure that your event, the sacrifice you're making of willing to get up to that kind of trouble, must be captured. It must be put out in the press. It must be put out on social media. It's got to make a big splash. If you know that the action you're taking is not likely to stop the event, for example, Ben Cohen was not going to stop that hearing altogether. He wasn't going to get RFK removed from office by doing that. He wasn't actually going to stop this country sending funds to kill innocent children in Gaza. But what he did was about tipping the needle a little bit further, drawing attention to the ways that this regime, specifically RFK, is harming children, specifically the way that Republicans are taking Medicaid funds away from children, specifically about the ways that this regime is funding arms to Israel. I just want to encourage you, if you want to help your immigrant neighbors, think about whether or not the actions that you want to take in the moment when you see people that you care about being kidnapped by ICE, and so you want to react emotionally, think about whether those actions are going to have an effect. Are you going to get the outcome that you were hoping for? Are you going to stop those people from being hauled off by ICE? And if you get yourself arrested, how are you going to be able to help your neighbors? Is there a better way that you could advocate for your neighbors? Is there better strategy that could be employed? What are the ways we can use our privilege effectively to have the greatest impact? Do you understand? We don't want to throw away our shot. Again, I absolutely empathize with the passion of the woman in that video who was saying that white women, we need to change the optics. We need to get in the way. But I would really encourage you to think about what it is that you are prepared to do, what you are encouraging other people to do, and whether you fully understand the ramifications. And I don't mean just like the personal consequences for you. I also mean the ramifications for your community and whether you're going to have positive or negative impacts and whether you're going to squander the chance to have more of a positive impact by doing something impulsive in the moment. We need to right now be strategizing what happens when ICE comes to our neighborhood, what happens when ICE shows up at our church or our local school or our local hospital. Because remember, the Trump regime, they changed ICE's policy so they could now literally raid hospitals where women have just given birth and haul them off. They have repeatedly literally tried to come into schools and take little children. They have no hesitancy about breaking into your place of worship to snatch people away. So we need to be scripting out in advance. What are we all going to do when that happens? We need to be gaming out these scenarios. A couple of things I would really encourage people to do are to take the ACLU Know Your Rights training and perhaps the ICE rapid response trainings that are available from a number of organizations. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will have all the links in the description. If you are somebody who is qualified to get your legal observer training, please do that. I'm going to talk about this more in a future video, but think about creating a reverse neighborhood watch. Instead of having people walking your neighborhood and keeping an eye out for like potential crooks, you're watching out for the cops, you're watching out for ICE. You're watching out for the tools of the state who are seeking to terrorize people in your neighborhood. Masked men who, in violation of the law, refuse to identify who they work for, but are hauling people away. We need to have people in our neighborhoods, in every neighborhood around the country, who are trained in rapid response, who are ready to show up, document what is happening, and understand what the rights are. Know your rights is not just for you and me, it's also for the people that this regime is targeting. Your community needs to think about putting together a bail fund, developing relationships with lawyers, having them ready to go. We've got to build those connections. All of our little grassroots organizations, all of our churches, all of our neighborhood associations, we need to all be reaching out and connecting, sharing resources, sharing strategies, sharing planning and training, communicating with each other. We have to game out everything that is happening. We have to have plans in place and we have to have rehearsed them. We have to be familiar with them. We have to be familiar with the laws. We want to have maximum impact. And that means we've got to be smart. I often talk about those 3 states of mind from DBT therapy, right? We cannot be operating in emotion mind right now. And honestly, I would say we need to be very much in rational mind. Now is the time to strategize and plan and get our shit together. We don't want to be caught off guard. We don't want to be surprised. We need to know what the law is. We need to know how to act when the moment arises. And we also need to not go into this naively, not understanding the consequences. People need to be prepared if they're going to take on an action to understand what the legal implications might be and like really get in touch with themselves about whether they're willing to absorb those. And then thinking about whether getting yourself arrested is really furthering your cause or whether it is depriving the community of you as a resource and whether it is actually detrimental to the things you want to accomplish. So like, I understand that woman's video. I understand seeing your neighbors being hauled off and wanting to just like throw your body in the way. But please, let's game this stuff out. Let's talk to experts. Let's plan and strategize because when we act, we want to be successful. Successful in helping the most vulnerable that are targeted by this regime, and successful in restoring our democracy.
Is the current status What is the current status of drones in Ukraine? How is Ukraine using drones, and what kind of drones are they using? So first off, a shout out to the Angry Bird Squadron and Birds of Prey. If it wasn't for you, none of this would have been possible. Shout out to Operator Starsky, who put me in touch with Ukrainian drone engineers, and to Colonel Vogel at the Joint Air Power Competency Center, where I was invited to speak last October. But before we get started, a little bit of background here. I gave a lecture to some Army 35 Foxtrots about 2 months ago. These are all-source intelligence analysts, about what Ukraine is doing with their drone tech and where they might be going with it and how that can reflect on the United States military. So this video is a modified lecture that I recorded that I gave to some contractors with unclassified intelligence. And this video will be done in a very Perun lecture format where I show slides. The slides are available at ryanbeth.substack.com for paid Substack members. If you're not a paid Substack member and have a .mil, just send me an email. Let me know. I will get those slides to you. But dude, my Substack's like $5 a month. You can spare $5. And you get to access a lot of features that you can use in your career. One more thing. You know, it's kind of funny. I actually had people reach out to me on Instagram, and they sent me an email, and they said they never heard back. So I tried to get to the bottom of this. I Googled myself, and guess what? Data brokers have associated the wrong email with my name. I don't know who this dude is, but it's not my email. Now, the funny thing here is that this is like, I feel sorry for this dude. I'm actually going to contact him and tell him about Aura, which is my sponsor for this video. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your phone number or why your inbox is flooded with spam, this is why. Data brokers like this sell your data, and they do so without your consent. And they do it to anybody who has a credit card. Heck, they probably add the purchaser's data to their database as well. Now, they are legally required to remove your data if you ask, and they make this process hard on purpose. I've actually recommended Aura to people before to get their names removed from these sites. They take care of actually contacting these brokers to get your information removed. So think of Aura as an all-in-one digital security tool. You get weekly summaries like this one here that was sent to me the last week of March. You also get real-time fraud alerts, 24/7 monitoring, as well as round-the-clock US-based tech support. Plus antivirus and a VPN and a password manager. If anything does happen, Aura includes $5 million of identity theft insurance protection, as well as fraud experts that can help. So if this dude had just used Aura, maybe he wouldn't be confused for me getting all these weird emails. So go to aura.com/Ryan, try Aura for 14 days. In those 2 weeks, you'll discover where your data is being exposed and sold. All right, let's start the lecture. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending this lecture. I'm going to ask that the proctor, the instructor, hold all questions till the end, and then we'll go through a Q&A session afterwards. A couple of things about me to start. My name is Ryan Macbeth. I'm a retired anti-tank heavy weapons infantryman. I'm a software engineer, cyber guy. I used to work on C4ISR systems for Accenture Federal Services. Currently work as an intelligence consultant at Velocity. I'm also known as the Iranian missile guy on Newsmax. I'm also a YouTube content creator. I guess I'm an intelligence influencer. And believe it or not, I am not a former CIA, DIA, or Mossad. Although if you do happen to work for one of those organizations, I will be more than happy to sign the back of the check. I'm going to start out by talking about this little drone right here. Once upon a time, there's a little drone that could. Performed really well during the initial invasion. The Ukrainians even made a song about it. By July of 2022, Russia had figured out how to do electronic warfare against this drone. By October 2023, the Bayraktar TB2 was mostly relegated to reconnaissance. At the start of the war, the drone advancements came at the pace of every 6 to 8 months, roughly. Today, drone advancements are coming at the pace of every 6 to 8 weeks. Every 6 to 8 weeks, there's a new type of technology that's being integrated into drones. So, as of today, 70% of casualties caused by drones were on both sides. Just a couple of years ago, just last year really, 70% of all casualties were caused by artillery. That has shifted over to drones. Ukraine is specializing in first-person view drones, bombers, and interceptors. FPV drone, you see that on your left. Backfire K2 bomber, that's an example of one of Ukraine's actual honest-to-God bomber drones with a payload bay and everything. Fowler Interceptor, that's a homegrown Ukrainian drone model. First-person view drones, let's kind of get into them. You basically have three types. You have anti-personnel drones, you have anti-tank drones, and you have landmine delivery drones, at least when it comes to aerial drones. Landmine delivery drones, believe it or not, they are kind of falling out of favor right now. And the main reason is that Ukraine just is not facing Russian armor as much as they used to. They're facing a lot of Russian light trucks. They're facing people on motorcycles. There have been cases of Russians facing, or Ukrainians facing people on donkeys. But they're not facing armored vehicles as much, so you're starting to see fewer anti-tank drones that'll go and drop off an anti-tank landmine. FPV pilots are fairly close to the front lines. They normally live in trenches or in temporary shelters. So these guys are embedded with the infantry, or very close to the infantry. It's not like the global war on terror, where the United States is operating all of our drones out of Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. These guys are really close to the front line, if not on the front line, usually operating from a bunker. All right, bomber drones. This is really unique because the world has literally never seen this before. The Backfire K1 is the latest example of Ukraine's bomber drones. They carry 2 mortar rounds, or roughly 10 to 12 pounds of payload with a range of 86 to 93 miles. They can also carry 16 30-millimeter anti-personnel bomblet grenades. And these are the VOG 30 grenades. And they do this from an internal bomb bay. So Ukraine has a drone, and they put an internal bomb bay in this drone, and they can drop munitions out of this drone literally like a bomber. Now, an onboard ballistics calculator is used to estimate when to drop. Its software is constantly being improved. The organizations I spoke to about this tech, they wouldn't really get into the ballistics calculator, but suffice to say, there is a piece of software that can use visual clues and other clues to figure out how high up it is, and from that, when to drop the munition to hit the target that the operator selected. When finished, the drone returns home. They prefer to land by parachute. They can also do a belly landing. Parachute takes a lot of stress off the airframe. Now let's talk about interceptor drones. Well, here's two, the Fowler and the Brave 1, which is a German design that Germany has given or sold to Ukraine. These interceptor drones directly crash into enemy drones, and they stop them by smashing right into them. Some interceptors also use shotguns or nets. Ukraine also has aerostats that launch interceptors. So essentially, this aerostat you're seeing there is it holds one interceptor on it and has a bunch of other sensor systems. That's the middle picture. And when that thing fires, they have drones that can fire from the actual aerostat. They also have several more on the ground. And I believe the range of this with thermal cameras is about 5 to 8 kilometers, roughly. So these things can protect sensitive military installations. There's also long-range drones like the Seth and the UJ-25 Beaver. The UJ-25 Beaver has a 1,000 kilometer range. It has attacked Moscow before. So one of the things that you can kind of say about the current war in Ukraine is that the difference between a cruise missile and a drone is kind of becoming murky, right? Ukraine's newest Seth drones are essentially copies of the 136 Shahed, except they're a lot smaller, and they also have autonomous targeting on them. I can't get into this that much, but the operator essentially tells it the type of target and the range of the target. The drone figures out how to actually get the munition there. Now, one thing to note is that 10 feet in length is about normal now. So, it used to be when the war started, you saw a lot of hobbyist drones that were very small, and slowly you started building up to different kinds of larger drones. It seems like 10 feet is kind of hitting the limit of what you want to go up to so that it doesn't show up on large radar, the large radar picture. You can do, on radars, you can tell a radar system, hey, ignore targets that are flying this low, or ignore targets that are flying this slowly, or that are of a certain size. And they do this kind of discrimination so that way they don't flood their radars with every single bird and flying object in the air. But it seems like above 10 feet, that kind of ends up showing up on radar. And that's not something you want to, you don't want to get identified by radar before you get to your target. Also, quad, hex, and octocopters are becoming common on the Ukrainian side, but only fly at night. Russia really hasn't invested in them, and there's a reason for that I'm going to kind of get to. Here's two examples: the Heavy Shot, which is a 24-mile range and an 88-pound payload, and the R-18, which has a 12-mile range with an 11-pound payload. A lot of these typically fly at night. So I'm sure you've heard of the Baba Yaga drone. Baba Yaga isn't a type of drone. It's kind of a class of drone. These heavy quad and hex and octocopters that essentially only fly at night and prevent the Russians from sleeping. All right, let's talk about drone control. Right now, the 900 megahertz frequency is essentially gone. That whole band is gone. The 900 megahertz was initially used for running those small DJI drones and essentially using cell towers to communicate. Today, that's just totally going to get jammed by Russia. Drones are now operating in two different bands, 300 megahertz or UHF, and 1 gigahertz, which is L-band, like marine radio. But there are ways around this kind of jamming. And I'm going to get into two ways Ukraine is doing this. First is that GPS can be denied to Ukraine, right? So here's what they do. They set up transmitters. And it's really no different than intersection and resection when we're looking for something on the land navigation range. If you go out into the field and you set up two portable transmitters, and they're, let's say, 1 kilometer away, 2 kilometers away from each other, and you know where those two transmitters are, if you're 275 degrees from the frequency of one transmitter, 210 degrees from the frequency of the other transmitter, you can just kind of trace those lines back and you know exactly where you are. So that's one way Ukraine is kind of getting over the GPS jamming. You can also transmit a code. Let's say you have an antenna that rotates once every 30 seconds. So you have this antenna and it's rotating, and every, let's say, 30 degrees it sends out a code. So at B, at 30 degrees, or 0 degrees to 30 degrees, you send out the letter B. At 30 degrees to 90 degrees, or 45 degrees, send out the letter C. At 90 degrees to 135 degrees, you send out the letter D, and so on. So if you're flying in your little drone, if the drone is flying and it detects the letter D, it knows that it's between 90 and 150 degrees from the receiver. Now, this gets more accurate as you put more receivers out there. Only issue is that the codes have to be changed every single day, right? Because if you're sending these codes like in the clear, or even if they're not in the clear, even if they're encrypted, but there is a pattern to that encryption, that'll let the bad guys know, oh, okay, a drone is headed this way from this direction. So you have to change these codes every single day, but you should be doing that anyway with your SOI, your signal operation instructions. Ukraine also has ground drones. They're mainly used for medevac, cargo, mine clearance, and mine laying. Medevac drone, just what you think. I mean, it's a track. This is actually controlled by an operator. You put the casualty on that thing, you send them back. One of the big problems that we're having right now in Ukraine is that ground ambulances just can't get to casualties. There's just too much artillery and the Russians will target them. Medevac, the idea of helicopters dust off medevac, that's gone. That's never going to happen. Not in a contested environment. So Ukraine has to use these ground drones for medical evacuation. Let's go to the next slide here. Cargo drones, a simple box on wheels that moves, battery powered, controlled by an operator. It prevents sending trucks up, because if you send a truck up, that truck has a lot of heat in its engine. It will get detected, it will get targeted, it will get destroyed. There's the Odyssey cargo drone that can hold about 1,600 pounds. Mine clearance. So these have little arms that come out and I'll grab the mine, I'll grab the landmine, the arm comes out, grab the landmine, move it off to the side. Russia has these things as well. So this is not necessarily unique to Ukraine. In fact, this is a Ukrainian copy of a Russian mine clearing robot. A ground drone with a PK was used in an all-autonomous attack on Russian positions just in this December. I believe it was the 11th National Guard used this thing. Here's an example of the NOM drone. It has or the GNOME drone. It has one PK, machine gun, and 2 RPGs. Now, ground drones are kind of interesting. They're not actually controlled. All drones are controlled line of sight. And one of the issues, if you're on an attack, you have to be within line of sight of that drone. So Ukraine will actually fly. They'll fly drones as retrans stations. So the drone will bounce a signal up to the retrans station. The retrans station will send the signal back down to the operator, and commands will go up to the drone, back down to the ground drone. So that's kind of how Ukraine is getting over the lack of line of sight when it comes to some of these drones. Ukraine is also developing fiber optic drones. Now, when it comes to fiber, there's good and there's bad. Typically, the range of these fiber optic drones is between 10 and 15 kilometers. These days, it can get out to 20. Some models can get up to 40 or 50 kilometers on a spool of fiber optic wire. These fiber optic drones, they can't be jammed. Now, there's also some bad things with fiber optic drones. And in some ways, the bad outweighs the good. It's a different tool. You use this tool for different problems, right? So why they make different tools? You don't use a hammer to screw in a screw. So the bad, these fiber optic drones can't be used in the forest. The wires will snap. It's also a single use. If you send a fiber optic drone out and you try to recover it, you essentially lose half your range, right? So that being said, a lot of, at least in Ukraine, a lot of the people using these drones are special operators. Not special operators in special forces, but all they do is fly fiber optic drones. Some commanders are also pushing fiber to the detriment of other projects. And some of this goes back to, if Russia has it, well, then maybe we need it too. So if you have some guy who's a brigade commander and he's like, man, I really like Russia's fiber optic drones. I think we need fiber optic drones, even if it's not the best tool for the job. I mean, what are you going to do? Say no? You want to say no? I don't want to be the guy that says no, right? The last thing is these things leave shiny wires around. And if you look at some of the footage, you just see wires in the tree. They look like Christmas garland. And you can just trace that all the way back to your position. Russia actually doesn't particularly care about tracing things back to their position because there's not a lot Ukraine can do about it, right? If Ukraine doesn't have enough artillery, you can trace lines back to your position all you want. It's going to be really tough to hit you. All right, let's talk about drone production in Ukraine. Ukraine literally has thousands of basement drone shops. The good news is that this has distributed production, right? It is very difficult to destroy all 1,000, 2,000 drone manufacturing shops. The bad is that you have multiple designs, and sometimes you're making the same mistakes, and brigades compete for talent. So if, let's say, you are in the 11th National Guard Brigade, and you come up with an idea that solves a problem that your soldiers have, you might not necessarily tell the 13th National Guard Brigade, right? Number one, you're busy. Number two, you know, in some ways, like you're competing with them, right? You're competing with them for the best drone footage that will attract Western audiences to send your brigade money. So they're not necessarily helping each other. Most drones are made in distributed factories by thousands of small companies. Russia has these massive facilities, and typically Russia only makes one or two kinds of drones, as opposed to the various experimental models, the thousands of experimental models that Ukraine uses. But most of these shops only use one design, or they concentrate on one design. Once they get it right, they keep making the same design. But they have constant innovation, constant feedback. Because Ukraine has this relationship directly with the brigade that's sponsoring them, they can, the people in that brigade can go back to the manufacturer and say, hey, this thing didn't work, and here's why, and here's what you need to do to improve it. And that's really not something Russia has. A lot of brigade sponsorships are through drone kill videos, where they'll record the drones dropping munitions and blowing people up, and then they'll put a link at the bottom of the screen to say, hey, come donate to my brigade when you get a chance. And they're full of, these brigades are full of highly motivated Ukrainian engineers and programmers. And they are certainly motivated to stay out of the infantry. And one of the ways of staying out of the infantry is to make sure that you have a skill like engineering. All right. Ukraine right now is producing its own batteries. This is big news. We have a hard time doing that. Ukraine is also started to produce its own motors. Chinese motors still dominate. And for the most part, Ukraine has started to make its own motors, and this is actually really big news, and I'm going to get to why a little bit later. Ukraine has started to produce its own CPRA antennas. These are controlled reception pattern antennas, and CPRA antennas are anti-GPS spoofing antennas. If you look at some of the GPS systems that we have, like the Dagger, if you notice that the GPS in your phone is just one chip, right? Or usually there's two chips. But the GPS on something like a marine radar or marine GPS or a vehicle GPS, or even a like a Dagger, like the GPS system used by the Army, there's an external antenna that it's in a circle. That's because these chips are essentially on different slices of a pie, and it can filter out bad signals. And the way I kind of equate it is that if you've ever been out at a bar and you're trying to talk to your friend, but there's like 5 white girls who are celebrating someone's birthday, and they're being loud, right? I love you, oh my God, you guys, you're the best. And you're trying to talk to your friend, right? So what do? You turn your sensors toward your friend, right? You focus your sensors on your friend. So these CPRA antennas, what they can do is they can kind of filter out the noise of GPS jamming and kind of focus those antennas on an area that is known to be good. All right, next slide. Ukraine is creating their own computer vision and autonomous targeting chips. Ukraine is creating their own flight controllers. A company called Viri just made 1,000 made in Ukraine first-person view drones. Let's talk about drone detection sensors. What you see there in the picture is an Israeli IE-MHR. These systems were actually bought, I believe, bought three systems. The Poles, a bunch of Poles crowdfunded one, or crowdfunded three of them from Israel. Israel doesn't give anything away for free. Drone detection sensors. You got thermal sensors, acoustic sensors. The Israeli IE-MHR is one, and you have radar sensors. All are very, very short range. These thermal sensors, like the one you see on the left, that is a Ukrainian-made thermal sensor. And this particular aerostat uses thermal sensors that are good to about 8 to 10 kilometers. There's also acoustic sensors. The Shahed 136 is a very specific sound. It sounds like a lawnmower. Initially, Ukraine established what they call the Skyforce network, which was this network of 10,000 microphones. Essentially, it started as a bunch of people with cell phones they put up on sticks. And when someone, and they would call someone, and when that call got through to an operator, they would go, oh, okay, there's a Shahed drone coming down this path in this location, because they knew where all the cell phones were. Today, Ukraine has the Zvuk system, which has about a 5 to 7 kilometer range, costs about $500 per sensor. Radar sensors. Radar sensors, long range, but they emit a signal. So anything that emits a signal is bad, right? Anything that emits a signal can be traced back to a location, and you can fire a missile down that signal. One good example, Robin Elvira. Initially, that was used to track birds. And I'm sorry, it was really IMHR. It's not acoustic. It was a radar sensor. My bad. But Robin Elvira was used to, initially, this sensor was used to track birds on like airfields. And Robin Elvira realized that a potential for drones, and so they started selling it to track drones. That Robin Elvira is in an undisclosed location. Counter drone. Currently, Ukraine is at the forefront of counter drone. There is literally nobody doing a better job than Ukraine at shooting down drones right now, or stopping drones. First item to talk about is, all right, I got to go back here manually. All right, for counter drone, interceptors, Fowler interceptor, Brave 1. These are extremely effective at shooting down drones. Extremely effective. They're also extremely expensive. So every time you see one of those interceptors go up, I want you to imagine like shooting a Ferrari up into the air, right? Yeah, Ferrari. About depending on the type, probably about $60,000. So, you know, an XLT model F-150, right? Imagine shooting one of those up in the air. But it's effective. I mean, if you are able to stop an incoming drone by hitting it kinetically and you just save the target, I mean, how much money did you save, right? Next is shotguns. Now, what's kind of weird is that people get really emotional when it comes to shotguns, probably because a lot of people have shot skeet, all right? Like, everybody has shot skeet before. People have shot shotguns before they've gone hunting, so they kind of know what a shotgun does, and it's very easy for them to comprehend, understand how a shotgun works. But shotguns are only somewhat effective, and then even only when the drone is extremely close and only during the daytime. And even then, ammo shortages are a problem. And you're carrying an extra weapon that you're not going to use for anything else. So that's an issue. There are adapters like this AK type shotgun adapter. I mean, that's great, but you have to screw it on every time you shoot. You literally put the shell in and then screw the thing on and you shoot. So there are more efficient ways of shooting, and you only get one shot out of that. Believe it or not, spotlights and machine guns are used to protect critical infrastructure. So it's like going back to World War II. They kick on the spotlights and the air raid siren and shoot flak at the Allied bombers. Well, these PK machine guns, they have a spotlight on them, and they're used to identify and target incoming drones. Jammers. Jammers were extremely useful at one point. Today, they're not as useful as they were. One of the issues that they've encountered is that these jammers, they don't work against FPV drones that are wire guided. Now, the way a jammer typically works is that if you have a plane, if you have a drone flying, you point the jammer at it and you pull the trigger, and then essentially this gun sends every single possible shutdown code that it has in its memory into that drone. And when the drone receives that shutdown code, it falls out of the sky. Well, that doesn't work against fiber optic drones, of course. Lasers like the Trizub are being tested. They have about a 2-kilometer range. A lot of people have said lasers are the panacea for drones, but there's a lot of smoke on the battlefield. There's fog on the battlefield. Lasers don't do all that well in smoke and fog. Biggest issue in counter drone right now is range versus cost. Counter UAS drones are expensive, but they have greater effectiveness and range. Machine guns are cheap but marginally effective. Shotguns are cheap, only marginally effective at short range. They're subject to ammunition interruptions, and you also have to carry an extra weapon. Lasers show promise, but they're expensive and they have limited range. And finally, detection is kind of the biggest problem, because if you can't detect that counter, or you can't detect that incoming drone, you can't actually send an interceptor to hit it. So that's a pretty darn big problem. So, conclusions. Ukraine has showed remarkable resilience in its innovation. This was also due to necessity, that is, lack of artillery shells. So, in some ways, we actually made this, right? We created this problem. When the US and Europe didn't give Ukraine enough artillery, they had to figure out a way to stop these Russian advances. And so they turned to drones, which is something they could manufacture fairly easily. And there are some people who think that, we don't need artillery anymore because we have drones. That's great, but artillery works in bad weather. Artillery works in high winds. We're never going to get rid of artillery. You need to think of drones as a way to complement what you have. And I'm going to get into some of the issues with us believing that the next war is going to look like Ukraine in a minute. Ukraine will become an alternative to China in the manufacturing of drone components. So right now, Ukraine is getting a lot of their motors from China. They're slowly moving production away from China into their own motors. It's hard for the U.S. to even do a motor. And it's kind of crazy to think about it, because it's just a bunch of copper wire with a magnet, right? That's all it is. But for whatever reason, we can't really develop these small, cheap magnets, these small, cheap motors for drones. And China has a huge advantage on us. One thing we can't forget is that Ukraine has been doing this for 3 years. We can leverage Ukraine as an ally and a partner when it comes to creating purchasing drones that are high quality, off the shelf, from a supplier that isn't China. So that's something we need to kind of keep into our back pocket here. It's that Ukraine can be a good ally when it comes to buying drones, purchasing drones. Next is distributed manufacturing is both a blessing and a curse. So when it comes to distributed manufacturing, yes, you're really close to the front lines. Yes, you are grabbing information from the frontline people and making changes, and you're iterating fast and you're failing fast and you're responding to those changes. However, you're not necessarily sharing those changes with other people. And that has been an issue in the Ukrainian military, where you might have one brigade with people who just developed drones for that brigade, and they're not necessarily going to share their secrets with another brigade. So you might have people who are all trying to solve the same problems that have already been solved by someone else. But there's really no way of distributing this information out to people, and a lot of the brigades don't necessarily want that in the first place. Insurgents will use this tech. That's really something we have to think about, because in the next war that has an insurgency, we're going to have to deal with the bad guys having these small, cheap drones who are able to put explosives on these small, cheap drones, drop munitions from these small, cheap drones, control other drones from these small, cheap drones, and even do ISR from these small, cheap drones. So the train is just leaving the station when it comes to the use of these drones by terrorist organizations in the future. Next is we must dominate the spectrum. So there's only one spectrum, right? There's only one electromagnetic spectrum. And if we don't dominate the electronic warfare spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, we don't have drones, we don't have communications, we don't have GPS, we got nothing. We're back to literally no different than what we had in World War II, right? Maybe even worse than that, because at least during World War II, we still had unencrypted radios. I don't know if the Germans ever jammed them. We could be all the way back to the Civil War, General Grant, right? Just using maps and compasses. So we have to dominate the spectrum. We also have to think in multiple spectrums. One of the issues that I've seen when soldiers go out to the field, some of these soldiers, they have, they're told, all right, you need to camo up, right? You put camo on your face. And you need to, all right, well, you need to conceal the Humvee, right? So you cut down some branches, you put branches on the Humvee, now it looks like a Humvee full of branches, right? But you do that and you step back 20 yards or something, and you go like, yeah, it looks good. But did you look at that Humvee on thermals? Because what's still hot? Like the wheel wells are still hot, the axles are still hot, the engine's still hot, the glass might be reflecting, right, from the sun. So if we're not thinking in multiple spectrums, we're going to die. And this also means, like, when we go out and we set up a talk, the days, the Technical Operations Center, the days of the Taj Mahal talk are over. The days when we could call back to CENTCOM in Qatar and say, hey, is it okay if I... Over. We're not going to have a Taj Mahal talk to take care of the thinking for us anymore. Because if we have a talk that's greater than 1 or 2 vehicles, it will get found, it will get targeted, it will get destroyed. If you can find something, you can kill it today. No doubt. And a Taj Mahal talk, look, it's going to suck. Maybe you got to run those OE254 antennas 600 meters away. Transmit from 600 meters away. Maybe that's something you're gonna have to think of. It sucks, but I wouldn't want that antenna sticking out of the place where I'm sleeping at night. Finally, do not assume the next war will look like Ukraine. And I leave this one for last because it's probably my biggest rant, and that is, I've heard people say like, "Oh, we need to give every soldier a drone. We need to give every soldier drone drop munitions. We need to give every soldier ISR capabilities." And do we? Do we? And I say that because I think if you give every soldier a drone, like, number one, is I'm not carrying it. Like, there's that, right? But also, the whole reason Ukraine is using drones so extensively is that they don't have enough artillery. And if you use something like an FPV drone, that FPV drone is only used once, and then all that money you made manufacturing it, that's gone. It might make more sense to have drones that can drop micro munitions, Like, that might be not a bad idea. But for the most part, we want to get away from the feeling that these drones are going to be the way of the future, because I actually believe that we're going to see the rise and the fall of the drone in Ukraine. That by the time the war in Ukraine is over, I think that counter drone is going to be so good that it's really going to make it harder to do drone warfare. That doesn't necessarily mean that we won't see drones, but drones are going to have to shift to things like AI, right? Stuff that can't be jammed. Because right now, like the tempo is with the drone. It's like someone, I'm sure the first time someone with a, the first weapon of war is most likely a spear, right? It's a pointy stick. I'm going to poke you with this stick until you do what I say, right? And so one day someone invented a shield. So the guy with the spear went up against the guy with the shield. It's like, whoa, I can't poke this guy with the stick anymore. What am I going to do? So right now, the drones, the people with the drones are the guys with the stick, right? And the people developing the counter drones, like MSHORAD, they're the guys with the shield. And we're still trying to figure out how this shield thing works, right? But I actually believe that we're going to see the rise and fall of the drone in Ukraine. And disregard everything I said in 8 weeks. It'll be out of date. That's how fast things are moving. That being said, are there any questions? Okay, I've got...
Most international observers are aware of NATO's policy to not admit countries with ongoing territorial disputes. Critically, that means that, as long as Russia's invasion continues, Ukraine will not become a member of the organization. However, there are practical steps that Ukraine can take now, and is taking now, that will help facilitate the process once that other barrier disappears. Among other things, one trick is resolving something known as interoperability problems, which somehow involves the need to purchase a whole...
Today there is interesting news from the Pokrovsk direction. Here the international...
Alright, from the top, there's an economy update where they've now increased the bounty cap from 2,000 to 3,000 cash. The devs comment that bounties are intended as a comeback mechanic, and we feel like... Alright, from the top, there's an economy update where they've now increased the bounty cap from 2,000 to 3,000 cash. The devs comment that bounties are intended as a comeback mechanic, and we feel like the current cap can increase to maximize that potential. Alright, for the armory, they're reducing the timer from 100 seconds to 75 seconds in rounds 1 and 3 for the power rounds, and then reducing the timer from 75 seconds to 60 seconds in round 2. The devs comment that we're reducing the amount of time you can shop during early rounds. We find that players need this time later in the game as they are selling and countering, but it's not as useful up front. Alright, for the tanks, only Zarya, she's a little too strong, so they're reducing the cash income from damage and healing by 12.5%. The devs comment that Zarya continues to overperform at all levels. Most of her power comes from how weapon power scales with energy, allowing her to reach very high damage ceilings, so we're slowing down the rate at which she can scale her weapon power. For the damage heroes, Cassidy, they're also reducing the income or the stadium cash from his damage and healing by 12.5% as well. The devs comment that Cassidy continues to be too dominant too consistently, especially at higher levels of play. Most of his power comes from how well he scales with weapon power, so shaving off a bit of his currency gain to slows down the pace of his scaling. For Reaper, the revolving ruin power is getting a reduction in its attack speed per stack from 5% to 4%. They're also increasing the amount of stacks from 8 to 10 to compensate. For his other power, Wraith Renewal, they fixed an issue where Wraith Renewal healing was always being doubled regardless of what your current life was. Oh, interesting here. And finally, for his other power, Spirited to Slay, they fixed an issue that caused Reaper's cooldown to be reset without getting an elimination. The devs comment that we're squashing a few bugs that we believe that has contributed to Reaper's high win rate. We're also making a slight adjustment to Revolving Ruin's ramp-up time and maximum stacks. We're planning to make some more adjustments to Reaper's weapon builds in the future to incentivize them to build stats other than just weapon power. And finally, for the supports, we have Ana. The home remedy power is getting an increase in its overhealth from 100% to 200%. For her dreamy power, they're decreasing the heal from 100% to 80%. And they're also decreasing the duration from 8 seconds to 4 seconds. So apparently this power was a little too strong. For her power Venomous, they're increasing the damage from 30 to 50. And for the quick scope rare hero weapon item, they're increasing the weapon power from 5% to 10%. The IV Drip, which is the rare hero survival item, they're increasing the overhealth from 100 to 150. The devs comment that Ana's abilities feature some of the longest cooldowns in the support roster, and their impact hasn't always matched that investment in Stadium. This update improves the effectiveness of her utility, helping keep her allies in the fight longer, and better rewarding well-timed ability usage. These changes should give Ana more consistent value in extended engagements.
Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the agreement that's been signed between...
Hello everyone. So I have another video here of a book getting destroyed. These aren't having the best of me's, it must be said. We've seen quite a few videos of these getting hit lately. This one...
Last week, there was a bit of a media circus about Ukraine.
Dad, should the government try to make water safe for people in every county in America?
No.
What? What?
What?
Thank you. All right, we are checking back in on our favorite politically divided family. We have the more liberal son debating his two MAGA parents on some core issues like Elon Musk, usually on the Constitution, on Donald Trump's presidency, and it never fails to be entertaining. Now, I've made a few videos about this family, and I've become more and more familiar with the people behind it. This is Chad Kulchin of the Dudesy podcast. He runs a podcast with Will Sasso, who I really like as well. I've been listening more and more. So now that I'm more familiar, these interactions are, of course, incredibly entertaining, and I want to bring you all along for the ride. Let's start with him asking his parents, what is your favorite thing that Trump has done in the past 107 days? And then we'll move on to Elon Musk, to safe water, and maybe we'll do a due process segment, but let's start here.
What is your favorite thing that Trump has done in these past 107 days, roughly?
Probably ended all wars, lowered all prices, and made sure the deep state was gone and there was no corruption in the government.
What is your favorite thing that Trump has done in these past 107 days, roughly?
Kick a bunch of illegals out.
Okay. Mom, what is your favorite thing that Trump has done?
Close the border like 99% and not allowing illegals to come back in and collect Social Security and get free government cards and all of that. So made our country safer.
All right. So both of you are that same answer, made the border safer.
Yes.
My next question is, Dad, what is something you think he could be doing better?
Oh, I think right now what he needs to do is bomb Iran.
Oh, wow.
More bombing, you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Mom, what is something you think Trump could be doing better right now?
Well, this is kind of a crazy thing, but, because Dad and I bought the cologne and the shoes and gave a little bit of money to his campaign, we didn't give a lot of money, a little money. I still get emails from him daily. I don't need emails, Mr. Trump. You are a president. Go do what you need to do and stop sending me emails.
Okay, so what could he be doing better is sending less spam to the people who are giving money.
And the dad is bomb Iran. I can almost guarantee this dude said he wanted Trump to end all wars just a few months back.
Yes.
And then the final question, Dad, is there anything you think that he should not have done? Something he has done in these past 100 days that you disagree with? You don't think he should have done it?
No.
Mom, is there anything you think he shouldn't have done?
I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything.
Oof. Okay, we'll go on to the next clip. And none of this is to offend the parents of Chad Chutkan. I have MAGA people in my family as well, but I think this is either a result of a bad media diet, like not even seeing the terrible things that Trump is doing, or just being intellectually dishonest. Like, I would wager this dad, the dad, is actually a very intelligent guy. And the mom seems both intelligent and empathetic. I would almost wager, though, that this dad just kind of watches a bunch of right-wing media or Fox News and is more intellectually dishonest rather than not having the intellectual capacity to understand. Because if you want to answer the question, is there anything Trump should not have done over the past 100 days? I can give you concrete answers. Obviously, I'm very locked in on politics, but I can give you concrete answers, and it's not even that hard. He should not have appointed Pete Hegseth. That's an easy one, right? I mean, even Trump would admit that he should not have appointed Mike Walls because he removed that appointment. Even Trump has admitted that he should not have deported Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia. They said it was an administrative error. He should not have started Liberation Day tariffs. He has implicitly conceded that because he removed the Liberation Day tariffs. He removed the massive tariffs on China with zero concessions. Over and over, we can show you things that Trump should not have done. But again, you have to be intellectually lazy or just not consuming the right media. Let's go on to this clip about the government making water safer. By the way, I'll link their Instagram in the description below if you want to go watch their Instagram videos. It's going to be in the description below. Make sure, if you made it this far in the video, you drop a like and comment some blue hearts. Check this out.
Dad, should the government try to make water safe for people in every county in America?
No.
What?
Why not?
The government shouldn't have anything to do with it.
Who should?
Who's going to make it safe?
Huh?
Who's going to make it safe?
The cities and towns that live there.
Those are governments.
Those are government officials.
Well, I thought you meant the federal government.
Yeah.
The federal government supplies money to the local governments so that they can help build infrastructure, technology, whatever they need.
They can raise taxes in the local.
Everybody should have the
Property
right.
taxes.
Everybody should have the right
I
to
don't want-
water.
I don't want my money going to that.
Everyone should have the right to water,
I think he's being more stubborn than anything.
food, housing. Yes, yes, yes. We're not that mean.
I agree with Mom. Dad, the whole point of this is that this specific area is very low income. You can't raise property taxes because nobody has property. You can't raise taxes because nobody has money. It doesn't do anything.
You know, this is a really good microcosm of a broader debate that happens in politics about how much government intervention there should be in a capitalist society. So I believe that free markets are actually okay. I think some of the best societies on the planet, even the Nordic model, even countries like Sweden or Denmark, they have free markets. They are capitalist societies. I am not somebody who thinks that the US should be a communist country, like actual like communism. I'm talking about the economic communism. And a lot of people will get mad at me for saying that. But I think America needs stronger social safety nets to make sure everybody has a level playing field. And from there, you have a free market. But the point that I'm making is that you still need the government to step in and fix inefficiencies. For example, if certain companies are polluting the hell out of the air, if certain companies are using incredibly horrific and harmful practices, the government steps in and it fixes those inefficiencies. Or if water is being polluted, the government steps in and it fixes those inefficiencies created by capitalism, and it makes sure that wealth disparity, for example, isn't an inefficiency that happens. Wealth inequality and disparity is something I think we should be focusing on a lot. And again, look at the Nordic models. So, you know what? I know people in the comments are going to be mad at me. They're already commenting, Adam, I thought you were for communist America. I thought you were for full communism. No. I'm for redistribution of wealth in a pragmatic way where everybody has a level playing field from the beginning. And if that offends you, that I have like a pragmatic view, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. But to continue with this next clip, Elon Musk. I'm sure they have a very rational view on Elon Musk, right?
Dad, do you think that there's any possible way Elon Musk can restore Tesla's value, or is that company over?
Oh, no, it'll be back stronger than ever.
No, it's over.
Soon as the tariffs kick in.
Mom, do you think Tesla can be restored, or do you think the company is on the road to bankruptcy?
I think it can be restored. I haven't seen any more people destroying his vehicles or places because they're going to go to jail if they do.
They don't have to. The company is destroyed. They're down 71% in sales.
Yeah, I know. He will bring it back. He's brilliant. He'll bring it back.
It's over.
How do you think he could bring it back? How do you think he can repair the damage he's done to the reputation of the company as it's associated with him?
I don't know. I'm not that smart. Leave it up to him.
He's poisoned it.
He'd have to cut ties from Maja and rebrand as someone else.
I don't even think that will do it. I think the only way to save Tesla is for him to very publicly sell the company to someone else and have nothing to do with it. Anything he touches is dead at this point, I think.
Yeah, it's over.
We think he's brilliant. We will see.
Are you going to buy a Tesla?
No, we've never said we wanted to buy an electric car. Never.
I rest my case. The people who like him are now Maja. And Maja don't like electric cars. You guys like your oil.
We've never liked him from the start, though.
I know, that's what I'm saying. The only people that like him don't like his product, and the people that like his product don't like him. He's completely nobody's going to buy those cars.
Then you can see them tripping over themselves to post hoc rationalize everything that Elon Musk does. I think that these conversations are important. You know, this podcast is called The Necessary Conversation. Again, I said I'll link it in the description. But this dude is having conversations with his parents, and even if he doesn't break through to his dad, it seems like his mom is understanding what he's saying at some points and is applying empathy. And then he's modeling how to have these conversations for other people with their parents. I think this is a net benefit to the political discourse to be respectfully having these conversations. And again, his dad seems to be stubbornly overcorrecting and trying to take the staunch conservative position on everything. So for example, when he says no, the government shouldn't try to help people have water, it's because he's like taking the conservative apprehension of government overreach to the very extreme, saying the government shouldn't be able to take part whatsoever in anything, even if it means clean water, when I guarantee there are things in his life that he benefits from where the government steps in and corrects market inefficiencies, right? So I'll leave it at that. If you appreciate what I do, being candid and sticking up for the truth, and make sure you drop a like, subscribe. I love
potentially attacking the Kremlin's annual Victory Day parade. Ukraine had struck Moscow a bunch of times in the preceding days, leading to the perception that something more may be on the way. Now, I will spare you the rant about the silliness of that. I've already done that once anyway. But the irony of the situation is that something else did happen, or, more precisely, did not happen, that reveals quite a bit about Putin's current popularity in the broader political context of the invasion of Ukraine. What I want to talk about today is something known as the Immortal Regiment March, and how it fits into the broader political narratives about Putin being domestically locked into the war. This is the idea that settling on terms similar to the current line of control would inevitably see Putin lose his grip on power, and thus there is no hope for any sort of ceasefire now or in the future. However, that narrative is wrong. Putin is unlocked, as it were. The war itself is the real threat to his regime, and he can end it any time that he wants to. And all of that Western focus on the lack of a Ukrainian attack on the Victory Day parade means that we have not spent time discussing the more notable piece of news that came out of the holiday. But let's begin with the Immortal Regiment March. You have seen plenty of images of it before, because it makes for a nice stand-in whenever I need a visual for people marching on the streets of Moscow. It turns out that you do not often get that type of thing happening in defiance of the Kremlin. So, instead, I substitute the Immortal Regiment. The tradition began in 2012, way far away from Russia's political center, in a city called Tomsk. It was a grassroots movement to commemorate the sacrifices that Soviet citizens made during World War II, both on the front and at home. Moscow quickly realized that the movement had the political benefit of building patriotic sentiment, and thus co-opted the march. The first one took place in Moscow in 2015 in conjunction with the Victory Day parade. You are seeing scenes from it now. But let's shift to the scenes from this year's march. Oh, wait, all we have is a black mirror. Be right back, let me try to fix that. Nope. Well, that is okay. Let's just go back to 2024 instead. I guess that is not working either. How about 2023? Yikes, still no dice. Maybe try 2022? Finally something that works. Yep, the last time that the Immortal Regiment marched was less than 3 months after the invasion began. It was a bit after Russia's assault on Kyiv had failed, but things were still looking solid on the Eastern Front. Yet it is gone now, despite how this is supposed to be a pro-regime reflection of a historically pivotal event. A time when common people can take part in singing patriotic songs, like the national anthem. The problem is that all of those men against fire in Ukraine have caused Putin's popularity to take a nosedive. It is hard to measure because public polling in the country has become worthless since the invasion began, but you get critical clues every now and then. And while I will spare you the entire history of Ukraine's struggle, suffice it to say that the public image of the war within Russia has been poor ever since the 2022 counteroffensive. Sure, Russia is still making gains, but the rate is unimpressive, and not the type of thing you would want to hang your political career on. And if there is one thing that autocratic regimes fear, it is large public gatherings. Never mind the security risk of having Vladimir Putin himself march with everyone else. Thus, in the spirit of this channel's mantra, we have clear evidence of how the Kremlin feels about the security situation. Turns out, it is a mixed bag. Putin is not hated in the nation so much that he can no longer appear during Victory Day at all. To wit, here he is giving a speech at the Standard Parade. Sidebar, do you notice anything weird about this? Look behind him. There is an interpreter live translating the speech for Xi. You can see it better from this angle. What's funny about it is that the interpreter is audible during the entire speech. I suppose that goes to show you just how essential China is to this operation. Anyway, Victory Day is still okay, especially when there are important foreign dignitaries around. But immortal regiment marches? Well, those are still off the table. Now, conversations in this regard usually steer toward how Putin's unpopularity is what is causing the war to continue. A common narrative is that Putin is locked in. The argument usually traces back to the stroke of this pen, which formally annexed the 4 eastern Ukrainian oblasts into Russia, according to Federation law. And now, if Putin cannot achieve that objective on the battlefield, it will cause his inevitable downfall. This, however, is just misinformed. For one thing, Putin's calculation on whether to continue the war or pursue a ceasefire is a function of the relative risks. In other words, we need to compare Putin's expected political survival given a continued war versus a ceasefire. And let me tell you, if all 4 oblasts are what is necessary to secure Putin's survival, then Russia has a long way to go. For all of the problems that Ukraine is facing due to Russia having controlled the war's tempo inside of Ukraine for more than a year, these gains are still tiny in an absolute sense. Let's do the thing that terrifies my college freshmen the most, a little bit of math. There are about 23,024 square kilometers of unconquered territory in those oblasts. Even if we are generous and use Russia's best month as of late, the 600 square kilometers from November of last year, and then project those gains as guaranteed for every upcoming month, it will still take Russia more than 3 years to meet its aims. At that rate, maybe Putin's dreams of a white Christmas may come to fruition by the end of 2028. But that also magically assumes away problems like how to cross the Dnieper River to take over Kherson, or how to siege a city like Zaporizhia, which is nothing like what Russia has done since the beginning of the invasion. And we know that such a strategy did not turn out so well there for the invaders. All during that time, there will be thousands of Russian casualties each and every month that it continues. Look, this would be a plausible story to tell if the anticipated capture date was November 2025, but it is not. And the end of 2028 is still very optimistic. Sure, it is possible that the Kremlin has some sort of private intelligence indicating that more rapid advances will be forthcoming soon, but count me as skeptical there. Maybe a narrow goal like capturing just the Donbass has a more feasible time frame. Greater than 99% of Luhansk is under Russian control. For Donetsk, it is about 69%. But that still does not match up with the previously seen Federation law. 2 oblasts are not supposed to be Russian. 4 are. And if you really think that the mismatch between law and reality is a domestic political problem for the Kremlin, control over the Donbass, but not Zaporizhia or Kherson, is not going to solve that. Meanwhile, there is a separate narrative that as soon as Russian soldiers come home, they will be angry with the regime and seek revenge for their fallen comrades. You will often hear the Soviet-Afghan War cited as precedent for this, as returning soldiers' dissatisfaction with that conflict did indeed eventually lead to reforms from Moscow. But this once again fundamentally misunderstands the economics of the war. Such a concern may have once been true after the initial invasion declaration, and the Kremlin's mobilization strategy the following fall reinforced it. But ever since then, the Kremlin has been recruiting based on voluntary contracts. The people going over there now are getting paid a killing. If the war ended tomorrow, each of them will have effectively won the lottery. They all received large signing bonuses on an expectation that they may die. But, lo and behold, they were not blown to smithereens. They survived. I do not know about you, but when I hear that people suddenly received an influx of money, my first thought is not that they are about to take risky actions that come with a high probability of going to jail. Rather, the danger for Putin is on three fronts. One is the oligarchs, who are footing the bill for the war directly through taxes, and indirectly through lost revenue due to the West sanctions regime. Second are the pensioners. They are the victims of Russia's inflationary spiral. Worse, as retirees, they are not bargaining for higher wages to offset the declining value of the ruble. And third are disaffected family members of the fallen. They have effectively lost the lottery. There may be time for a eulogy now, but afterward, they might be looking to take it out on Putin. Actually, that is another big reason why the Immortal Regiment March has been put on pause. It certainly would not look good if some of those angry family members replaced images of World War II heroes with those who died in Ukraine. Anyway, the first two groups will enjoy instant relief once the war ends. In the meantime, though, the third only grows in size as the war continues. That is why Putin can end the war whenever he wants to. He has not chosen to do so thus far, however, because he thinks that the lines will look better if he continues. Remember, as long as Ukraine is on the back foot and lacks proper entrenchments, the expected outcome of a continued war right now does not match the expected outcome if restarted. Until that gets resolved, you are not going to have the two leaders sit down at a table and engage in meaningful negotiations. In turn, it is up to everyone in the West and Ukraine to dissuade Putin of the idea that Russia has the momentum. And that will be easier once we dispense of the notion that Putin is locked into the conflict and start focusing on something productive instead. So please, let's stop complaining about the poor state of Russia's domestic institutions. They are indeed poor, but that is not the issue here. Look, to be clear, the post-war situation will be no picnic for the Kremlin. We have discussed before how there is going to be a mess of an economic reckoning at that point. You would need a heck of a central banker who could navigate the corresponding economic crash when all of the loose monetary policy to fund an endless supply of materiel dries up overnight. To reduce the shock, Russia will have to wean itself off of the cash flood, likely moving some of that money to the public goods programs that have gone unfunded for more than 3 years. And that is something that is still readily feasible because the Kremlin has not yet depleted its full Fortress Moscow reserves. Any lock-in problems there are still a long ways away. What is more, Russia's central banker is indeed as competent as they come, and she may just be able to keep these patriotic marches from turning into protest marches. So yes, ending the war will be a thorny political problem for Putin. It is just that continuing the war is even more dangerous. Meanwhile, continuing to tell you about these two excellent books on the war is not dangerous. It's educational. Check the video description for more information about them. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.
Russian saboteurs arrested in Germany while the Russians keep advancing on the eastern flank of Pokrovsk. But we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that is happening along the front lines and behind them in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. The Russians have struck Ukraine again with Shahid drones. In one attack, they used 108. Ukraine managed to intercept 85 of them, a success rate of 11%. In a second strike, the Russians only used 10 drones, and the Ukrainians managed to down all of them, so 0% success rate. We'll switch to the developments along the front line, and we start in the region of Sumy, and here the Russians have advanced inside of Sumy. We have the Russians here at Bilovody, and we have them directly north of Volodolany, or something like this. I apologize. So we have them here and reaching this. So meaning they have advanced over the past few days somewhat further south. To which degree they've gained a foothold is still unclear, but their advance is proven. That's it from this region. We switch to Kharkiv, and no change that I can observe here. On the eastern front, we have the Russians north of Zapatne. We have them here geolocated directly northeast of Zapatne. This is at this point roughly here. So a minor tactical advance on the western bank of the Oskil. Further south, the Russians are at Ritko Dub, and this is here. We have a geolocation of this as well, that they are right on the eastern side of it. So they have advanced roughly up to here over the past few days. That's it north of the Seversky Donetsk. To the south of it, I have no change until we reach the Toretsk region. And here we have the Russians crossing the canal close to Kurdiumivka. We have a geolocation of this here. The Russians have taken positions here. The videos show them being struck in dugouts, indicating that they probably consolidated control here. The Russians also advanced in other directions. Now we have them directly northwest of Toretsk here, of Kurdiumivka, I think is the name. No, of Krimske. Here at this lake, the Russians have been spotted, indicating a Russian presence here. Again, not always clear whether that means a foothold. The Ukrainians have been in the center of Toretsk. A geolocation shows a Ukrainian soldier in this region here being attacked by drones. And now this is a mere 150 meters away from where the Ukrainian failed counterattack ended in disaster here in the center. This might just be a soldier that has managed to get away from the wrecks that were created here and then was in this region. I do not see that this would indicate a continued Ukrainian presence inside. I would rather expect that this is a survivor of the initial attack that was spotted at this point. The Ukrainians are also in the northwest of Toretsk here in that industrial area. Once again, Ukrainian soldiers have been spotted. That should be, I think, at this point here. So there is fresh Ukrainian presence confirmed, but we also have the Russians in several buildings here inside of the mine. This indicates that they gained a permanent foothold. So the mine is, and we see this here up here, the mine is likely having a permanent Russian foothold now. The Russians, how they are getting supplied is unclear, but it seems clear.
So today's stand-up, we are going to talk about TDD. Okay, we're not going to have some topical topic. We're going to go after the big stuff, okay? TDD, is it good? Is it bad? Do you use it? TJ's just smiling, looking like an absolute champ in that freeze frame. Dude, somehow TJ's the only human I know that gets freeze framed, and it's a good picture.
Yep.
Yeah, look at TJ. Look at that
I
Labrador.
can't
He's
handle
so
this
stuck.
right now. I cannot handle this right now.
All right, Casey, you probably have the strongest opinion, potentially, out of all of us.
Okay. I doubt that, but okay.
All right, because I also have a strong opinion, but I'm willing
Probably
to...
you then. Yeah, I think Prime, you gotta lead off the strong opinions here.
I'll lead off with the strong one, which is, so I recently just tried another round of TDD. Okay?
Prime, you have to say, hey everyone, welcome to the stand-up. We got a great show for you tonight. I'm your host, Supremagen. With me, as always, are TJ. Hello. Trash. Hey everyone. C. Muratori. Great to be here, Prime. Thanks. Today's topic is tested. Have you ever heard a podcast before?
Thanks, everybody, for joining. You're watching the hottest podcast on the greatest software engineering topics, the stand-up. Today, we have with us Tej, who's in the basement fixing something.
Is that a Home Depot ad?
Look, he's showing us his router. We have with us Trash Dev, broke a toe winning a judo competition, still living off that high, and Seymour Torrey, the actual good programmer among us.
Oh, all right. I got a lot to live up to.
Yeah, don't worry, it's not hard to live up to, at least in this crowd. I'll kind of start us off on this one. So we've been developing a game called The Towers of Mordoria. We came up with the name from an AI, and AI generated that name for us. And effectively, I decided at one point, I have this kind of really black box experience. I have a deck of cards that I need to be able to draw cards out. When they're played, they either need to go to the discard pile or the exhaust pile. When there's no more cards in my hand or not enough to be able to draw cards, I need to be able to take all the discard cards. Dude, Teach is just flexing on us touching grass right now. Put all the discard cards, shuffle everything up, and then draw new cards back out, replenish the draw pile. Right? This sounds like a TDD pinnacle problem. There's black boxes. There's a few operations. I'm going to be able to do this. And so I just did this like a week and a half ago on stream. It was amazing. I did the whole thing, designed the entire API in the test, then set up all the tests, set up it all to fail. Then it did work, or then it failed. Then I made it work. Then it worked, and it was great, and everything was perfect. And I was like, there we go. We just did it. I just TDD'd, and it was a good experience. So then I took what I made, and I went to integrate it into the game and realized I made an interface that's super good for testing and not actually good for the actual thing I was making, and I had to redo it. And so it always, that's kind of been a lot of my experience with TDD, is that either the thing is simple enough and is super black box enough that I can make it and both the testing interface and the usage interface is the same, or I create an interface that's really great for testing and it's actually not that great for the practical use case. And I know people talk about how it's a great way to develop your architecture and all this kind of stuff. I've just yet to really buy it, but I will say the thing that I do like doing is on problems that are hard to develop and have many moving constraints, I do like to co-create tests with it, meaning that I come up with an idea, how do I want to use it, I program it out, then I go create a test, which is backwards from TDD, go, okay, this is what I want to see. Am I even correct on this? Can I get a fast iteration loop being like, no, 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 yes, okay, got it. Next thing, I want to make sure it does this. No, 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 yes, okay, got it. And so I do like the fast iteration cycle of getting tests in early, but few problems feel like I can actually have that. And I feel like all things need to be tested immediately and need to be written first. You just write dumb interfaces. Everything becomes inversion of control. Everything's an interface. And you just have this abstract mess at the end of it because testing was the requirement, not, hey, use it when it's good. So that's my TDD experience. And I feel fairly strong about that. And if you say TDD is good, I feel like I'm going to jump kick you.
I can respond to that, or Casey, if you have strong feelings.
No, I think Trash. Let's go to Trash take first.
Yeah, no blockers on my end.
First, you couldn't deter me from doing any task, then to tell me I need to start off by writing tests. First off, second, I kind of had a very similar experience recently building.
Hold on, can you rewind for a second? What did you just say for your first point?
I said you couldn't deter me from doing work if you let off with me having to write tests first.
I don't even know what that means.
You mean you couldn't deter me anymore? Like that's the most deterring thing, or?
Oh man, am I stupid?
You are. Can you try using a different word to describe what you feel?
Confused.
Okay, let's reword this. Flip, please take this out.
Flip, leave it in.
I don't like test-driven development. However,
okay.
However, I just built something recently at work, which was very kind of similar to what Prime was saying. I ended up doing a little bit of test-driven development, but you wouldn't notice this, but I'm actually really kind of passionate about testing. So I'm going to kind of when I test, I would say 2% of the time, I actually lead off with test-driven development, and the rest is usually post-implementation because one, requirements and all these things change afterwards, right? So it's why write tests for things that are potentially going to change and you don't really know what's going to happen? But I do write tests for very granular things that I think are going to be used all the time. So for instance, like if I wrote a parser for like my CLI, the parser is going to be reused by multiple commands, probably never going to change. So I typically will write that, and I'll also write tests for things that take multiple steps to test. So like, people argue for end-to-end tests because you test just like a user. So that's kind of how I like to develop. I like to use it like I would use it for anybody else. But if I got to do like 3 steps to get to the point I want to test, I'm like, all right, screw this. I'm just going to write a test specifically for this like instance, and then I save time that way. So that's usually the time I arrive at test-driven development, is specifically in those scenarios. Otherwise, it's purely just like, what do you call it, integration testing and stuff like that, because you end up with stuff like Prime said, like when you write tests, you write everything so granular and everything works so modular that you just don't even know what it's like when you actually put them together. So that's why that's kind of like the way I approach things. That being said, like people that kind of like live and die by test-driven development, I don't get it. But I was hoping someone would be pro TDD in this group so I could argue with them. That's all I got for right now.
I'm pretty much right there with Trash on this one. My feeling on TDD is pretty much the same as my feeling on OOP, right? The problem is not if you end up with an object or something that looks like an object in your code in OOP, that's fine. The problem is the object-oriented part. The like thinking in terms of that wastes a lot of your time and leads you to bad architecture, I think. TDD is the same way. I think testing is very good, but test-driven development, meaning forcing the programmer to think in terms of tests during development, like that is what your primary thing is I'm making tests to drive the development, the TD part, that's actually the problem. I think the reason for that's pretty straightforward, and it's kind of weird because usually the people who advocate for TDD are the same people who would poo-poo any similar suggestion, like any suggestion that like, oh, we should measure performance during development. They'll be like, that's ridiculous, you're wasting so much program time. We're like, what about the 8,000 tests that no one ever needed because we ended up deleting that system anyway? And they're like, well, test-driven development is very good. So I think like the problem with all of those sorts of things, any of them, is just putting emphasis on something instead of talking about it like what it really is, which is a trade-off. If you're spending time making tests, or you're orienting things towards making tests, that is necessarily programming time that isn't being spent doing something else. Like, programming is zero-sum. If you spend time doing one thing, you're not spending time doing another thing. And so, for example, if you end up spending a lot of your time making the interface revolve around tests, you weren't spending a lot of your time making the interface revolve around actual use cases, because actual use cases don't usually look like tests. Therefore, sometimes you get the exact situation that Prime was talking about, where you do test-driven development and you end up with a completely unusable mess, which is actually very common in my experience, right?
I wouldn't call it a mess. I write pretty good code. I mean, it was like pretty decent. I just want to say.
The API. The API is a mess. Not the code, right? Like the code has been tested and it probably works, but the API is a mess, right? I mean, that's what happens because it wasn't designed specifically for the kinds of use cases it was meant to tackle. And so you end up with that problem. And again, it was shifting the developer's focus was all it took to make that happen. Good APIs are hard to make in the first place, right? So if you're adding more complexity to the programmer's workflow when they're trying to make an API that's good for the the actual use case, you're just going to get a worse result. Again, zero sum. So what I would say is like testing is better something that you do as the thing takes shape. When you're like, okay, we now have figured out like how this system works properly. We're really happy with it. The API is working nicely. We check the performance and we think we've got a reasonable path towards having this perform really well. Now let's start seeing what is the overlay, like what are the parts we can now start to add some little substrate to test that we think are going to have bugs that will be hard to find. Because that's usually the way I look at it. Like, what are the parts of this system whose bugs will be either very hard to find or really catastrophic? Like, they'll cost us a lot of money or they'll crash the user's computer or whatever, right? And then you put the tests for that, right? And that's how I've always approached it, and I think that works pretty well. And you do want to do that step, but I don't think you want test-driven development. It just seems like a really bad idea. And to be honest, when I use software that comes from people who are like TDD, this organization, CD, whatever, it's full of bugs all the time, right? Like, I'm not getting these pristine software things. I mean, I would imagine that the people at YouTube do a lot of testing and code reviews, and yet for the past 8 years, the play button cannot properly represent whether something is playing or not. For 8 years, right? Sometimes it's paused and it has the play thing, and sometimes it's playing and it has the play thing, and sometimes both of those times it shows the pause thing. It's just, it doesn't seem like the testing is working, guys. So again, I'd say, you know, I think you have to kind of rethink how you're allocating that time. That's what I would say.
Can we get TJ in here? Can Playboy TJ get in on this one?
Can we? Am I coming in loud and clear?
Yeah, your voice sounds
actually.
good. Your voice
Yeah,
sounds
it's 'cause
good.
I went
You're
outside
looking
like
good. The
Trash
grass
said.
looks good.
Thank you. So I would, I think I agree mostly with what everybody is saying. Although I would say for a few kinds of problems, the problem is I think people, when you say TDD, they just mean 10,000 different things. So this is like one of the problems, right? There's like people who are like TDD is only if you do red green cycle before you write the code. You have to write the tests, and like you can't write any code till you've written a failing test and blah blah blah. Which like I get that maybe they're the people who invented the word, so they can define it that way. But like I find that not very useful for some stuff. But there are like testing or like projects where I think I test like basically everything, and there's just ways that you can do it that are like more effective versus less effective. Like my favorite kind of testing is if you can find a way to do like snapshot or like golden testing, whatever, you know, people have different names for it, but where you can basically just write a test and then say, assert that the output is the same as it used to be. Right? Like, so usually I've seen those called snapshot tests or expect tests. I find that those are like
regression
super
testing often.
Yeah, or and like people will use them in regression, but like the kinds that I've done it before, like maybe I'm building up a complex data structure to like represent the state of like a bunch of users, or maybe it's the parse tree of something, or maybe it's the type system, like whatever it is. If you can find a way to represent that in like a human readable way, usually just by like printing it in tests that I've done, you can just like compare the diff between this one and before you made the changes. And they should be fast, at least. If they're not fast, then that's a separate problem. Like your tests have to be fast for people to run them. Otherwise they don't run them. Then those kinds of things tend to be, I find, like very effective and give you a lot of confidence that you haven't like scuffed anything throughout the system with your changes, right? Because you're sort of like asserting the entire state of something. And if something changes, it's really easy to update because you just say, oh, snapshot, update this. Cool, done. 1 second, all your tests are updated. You walk through them and change them. You get some other side benefits too, like in code review, you literally see the diff of the snapshot and you can be like, that looks wrong. That used to say false and now it says true. Those things that shouldn't have been flipped between those. So there are like certain problems where I've employed like nearly TDD in the snapshot style, in the sense that the snapshot always fails on the first time you run it because there's nothing to expect. And then you accept that snapshot if it looks good, or keep changing the code until it does look good. And then you like move on to the next thing. So, but it's kind of like a unique case. Like I wouldn't want to snapshot test a like HTML page, right? It would just like, there's no way that they're reproducible. It feels like, anyways. But like, so it's only for like certain subsets of problems, which have been more effective, like for me, because I've made a lot of dev tools in my career and stuff like that. So you want to do like verify that all of the references of something look like XYZ. Okay, very easy to do with snapshots. That's kind of the main, the one thing that I wanted to throw out there is like that style of testing I find really powerful, and I've used it a lot, like across projects you wouldn't really expect as well.
I've always had the opposite experience with snapshot tests. I feel like it's okay maybe if like it's you and maybe some other people that actually know the expected output of a snapshot. My experience is it changes and they're like, oh, no, let's just update it. And then the test pass again. And then you're kind of just left with this snapshot. And you're just like, all right. So it's to the point like where it's like, all right, let's just get rid of them because they're just changing every time requirements change and no one actually knows what the expected output is. And one more point I want to make. Someone said something about like test helper refactoring. I think that's true after a product is actually mature, because you're just going to be, it's kind of like a snapshot test where you're just going to keep updating your tests every time something changes to the point where it's kind of pointless. So I always find when tests are like that, I usually just delete them immediately. Oh yeah, go ahead, trash.
All right.
I called you trash. Oh my
Yeah, no, you call me
Trash,
trash.
your comment filled Prime with so much joy, it translated into physical up and down motion.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it was.
was literally
he was
watching
like-
him as I was talking,
Yes.
and I was like, let's just see how hype we can get Prime.
Yeah,
You
dude, I was
get-
high.
you-
I wish
you-
I
you
could
just
see you
filled him
guys.
with
I
joy.
see nothing.
Yeah, we see you. We see you guys. Yeah, we can see you, TJ, enjoying
TJ,
grass.
if you see a strange mushroom in the grass, do not eat it.
Oh yeah, don't eat it.
Do
Oh,
not
it's a
eat the
steak.
strange mushroom, TJ. When you're mowing and there's a strange mushroom.
Guys, I don't have my
Up
AI
again.
glasses. Do I eat this or not? Do I eat it or not, guys?
No, don't
trash?
eat the mushroom.
Eat the mushroom.
so
That's
I
all I
wanna do
heard.
it.
Okay, I'm going for it. Prime, say your thing.
Go for it. All right, so the reason why I actually agree with Trash a lot on this one is that I've done a lot of snapshot testing, and I think there's probably does exist a world where this makes a lot of sense. It's just all the times I've ever done it, whenever a requirement change or I have to make a change that warrants changing the snapshot, I've also had to make some non-minor change also to some logic throughout the program. So when my snapshot breaks, I also don't know if I got it right. So now I'm like trying to eyeball through this thing like one end of the line, like, okay, is this really what I meant it for it to be in this moment? How do I know I should change this from true to false? Like I have to reason about everything, and I find that true snapshot testing on big things is feels very difficult. Though I love it. Like I want, like ultimately that's what I always want. I fall into the hey, let's just make a golden trap constantly. Like that is like my default go-to. It's just like it's golden time. And then I always get sad. As far as like the whole unit test breaking and mature product thing, I just find that testing generally, I do not think testing helps for refactoring unless it's a true end-to-end test. Like you use the product from the very tippity top and you only have the very bottom of the output. You have nothing else you look at. But often I don't, like that's really hard to test because I'll write a function that I know is very difficult to get right. And I just want to test those 5 things. So I'm going to make a test that's highly coupled to that piece. And if you decide to refactor it, yeah, the tests all break. Like that's just a part of it. I wrote it so that this one thing works this one way. And I wrote a test that runs that one thing to make sure you didn't screw it up if you had to make a minor bug fix to it. I don't try to do that whole, I just really think this whole idea of unit testing and, it will prevent you from having headaches while refactoring has just been a lie from the beginning. And then what you'll hear is people do the exact same thing every time. Oh, that's because you're testing at the wrong level. It's just like, I'm just testing the things that I want to test. I don't test all the things. And what happens if you're testing on the wrong level just simply means that you broke a whole bunch of tests, but then some of your tests didn't, and that gave you the confidence that you did the right thing. And I just don't, I just am not going to test the universe. I'm going to have a few end-to-end. I'm going to have the hard parts, and that's that. No more.
I also think like when I'm thinking back to times when I've done testing, like a lot of times when I will break out testing, it's for things that I know aren't really all that refactorable or changeable anyway. It's like, oh, okay, I made this memory allocator, and we pretty much know what it does, right? You have these like 2 ways you can allocate memory from it, and you have 1 way to free or something like that, and then I just have these tests to make sure that, it doesn't end up in bad states or whatever it is. And that's a really useful thing, right? I've definitely done that. I do that for math libraries. Like we kind of all know what the sign of something should return. So if I'm making a math library that implements the sign function, that's not like, I don't have to think too hard about refactoring sign because math has been around for like, hundreds of years and isn't going to change tomorrow. Like, oh, bad news, guys, like React updated and now the mathematical definition of sign is different today. So
I'm so happy that's not even a possibility that React does stuff with math because we'd be screwed.
You never know, guys. There's still time. There's still time.
Yeah. So I do like them for that, and actually like there was I can think of a specific time when I was shipping game libraries when we had a really bad bug that caused a problem for one particular customer that took forever to find. And it was because it was in a thing that I had added to the library just for that customer as like a back door, right? They like, we need this one thing really quick. And I was like, okay. And I put it in there. and it had a bug in it. And of course, it wasn't in any of my standard testing or anything. It wasn't even really in anyone's use case, right? And and so like, you know, that was to me, I was like, okay, that's pretty good evidence that like the testing that I was doing before was good and like wasn't a waste of time, because like the one time it didn't happen, it caused a significant problem, right? And so, you know, presumably I would have had more of those in actual other customers had all the stuff that normally ships to the library not been tested in the way that I thought it should have been. And, you know, from then I was always like, you know, never do a one-off ad. Like, if I'm going to add something for a customer, I'll add it like the right way and actually put in the testing for it, or I'll just tell them, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now because, you know, I'm too busy or whatever. And so I do think like, yeah, when you can actually talk about this is isolated, this is what this thing does, I'm pretty sure it's not going to change. I think the tests are great, but before then, yeah, it's just, and also this was just kind of going off on a random anecdote, but just to circle back, the thing that Prime was saying is absolutely true. It's like refactor testing, not really. Like you can only really get like a very high level confidence from that. You can't really know. There could be all sorts of things that aren't really working, because whole system testing like that is going to miss. It's going to miss like weird edge cases that can overlap. And the only way you catch those with test driven development is knowing about those edge cases and making tests to kind of target them. And you can't do that if you just refactored everything, because now the edge cases are different, right? So yeah, I think TDD people overstate the degree to which that really works.
That's why I'm a huge fan of PDD, prod driven development. I think that every time you release and you have a bunch of people that use your product, you should do a slow release. You should measure the outcome, because it's just going to test all the weird things you're never going to be able to think of or set up. And if it starts breaking, you know that you screwed up. Previous version worked better than the new version. You can't release this new version. You got to back it up. Not P. Diddy, PDD, okay? Stop saying P. There's no baby oil in this situation, okay? But I mean, to me, it's
shots
like
fired at Sonos or whatever that company is called.
I don't know what I don't know what they did.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
So you guys are supposed to be the web dev people. What's going on?
What the hell are you talking about, Casey?
Sonos, the company that makes the speakers. Nobody?
Bose?
I
know
know.
Bose.
Are
is.
you kidding me?
You guys are the web dev guys. You know
Beats by Dre?
No, this is like legendary. Like everyone knew about
Yes.
this. So there's this company called Sonos. They make like the most popular internet-powered speakers in the world. Like everyone has these things. I mean, not me, because there's no way in hell I'm connecting speakers to the internet. That's just a way to make them not work, which Sonos went ahead and demonstrated for me. They had a product that everyone liked. They were an extremely popular speaker. They then did a big software update where like they were like, we're rolling out our new system. Like, you know, kind of like how Google does every couple of years. They're like, hey, guess what? Gmail's going to suck way harder than before today. Like you have you'll get 5 months of being able to switch between them, and then you're on to the new bad one. They did that, only there was no 5 months. They just basically said like, here's the new rollout. And it was awful. Like tons of feature regressions. It didn't really work. Customers couldn't do most of the things they used to. And it like tanked the company. Like it was just like immediately everyone hated it and nobody wanted to buy their stuff, and they had to do this walk back, and they couldn't roll back because they had redeployed all their servers, and I guess they didn't know how to like undeploy them. So you couldn't go back to the old app. It was go read about this. I can't believe no one knows about this but me. It was a massive failure.
I know it.
Never heard of them.
I heard it.
Okay.
Casey, I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I heard that. Okay.
We can hear you. We can hear you, TJ.
Good.
We can't really see you. You have very few expressions.
That's fine.
But
That's
fine.
fine.
Okay. Your point is that hardware is definitely different than software. You know,
This
if
is
Twitter
software,
has a
yeah.
small breaking thing because they made something, Twitter, all these major sites, they break all the time, right? I have much more forgiveness for that. This is, that's obviously different than, you got to play the field a little bit different when I say break production. If I'm building a game that only, so many people play, you don't want it just crashing nonstop while you're testing features. There's probably some levels, but if you're Twitter and all of a sudden you can't post for 5 minutes and only 0.001% of the people couldn't post for 5 minutes, it's just not going to make a huge splash, and it's probably not going to deter them from actually using the product again.
Well, I was agreeing with you with the Sonos thing. What I was saying was they should have done exactly what you're talking about. They should have taken and deployed a small server bank
Yeah.
for what they were doing.
Oh, I see.
Given it to 1% of their users, and their users would have been like, this is utter garbage, and I do not want it. And they would have been like, okay, pull that on back. Nobody saw it. We're fine, right? So exactly what you're saying, I was totally agreeing with you. I'm like, Sonos, if they had done that, they would have totally saved their company literally like 6 months of hell. Had they just given a slice of users this thing for a while, they would have been, some significant percentage above beta test, right? Like, so, like you said, 5-10% of the people got this. They would all been like, nope, 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 nope. And then they would have like, been like, okay. So that's all.
I do want to. Can I say one thing just about the testing part though? Is that okay? From before?
Maybe.
Sure. That's what the podcast is about. Exactly.
Yeah,
Cool.
I like
I just
this.
wanted to
I
make
like
sure.
this. Go for it, TJ.
My favorite project that I've ever worked on, NeoVim, by the way.
Can you go back to the grass? You were much more like better in the grass.
Really?
Your
Okay.
house is
My phone. If I
blocking
got
the towers.
I got a notification that said your phone is overheating because I was in the sunshine.
I was actually gonna bring that up in the beginning.
Like it literally
All right,
said
well,
your
just
phone is
make
overheating.
Sure your body's the one covering. Okay. All right, sit over it. Create a shadow,
Here,
TJ, so they
I'm
can't.
if you guys
so
are
the
in the
sun
shadows
can't get
now.
your phone.
You gotta
Hey, what's
plank over your phone.
Hey, what's up, boys? Hey, yo, what's up, boys?
This is like getting into like TJ profile pic territory where it's like on the dating app. Can you tell us some of your pet peeves, TJ? Do you
Probably
like long
top
walks
five-
on the beach?
I'm a long walks enjoyer. I'm really not a fan of short conversations. I want to really find out about the real you. I don't know what else. I don't even know if any of my
TJ
words are
already
coming
did.
through.
TJ's actually just describing himself right now. That's all TJ's doing.
I love laughing. I love having fun. I like to make you laugh. This is just me to Prime. This is my pitch for getting on the podcast.
That's true. I'll make fun of trash.
Yo, if there's a guy named Trash on the podcast, I will make sure to make fun of him every episode. He uses one password. Are you joking?
All right. TJ, what's your take?
My take is my favorite project that I've worked on, and like definitely the one with the most weird edge cases and probably users, NeoVim. Like the test suite for NeoVim is amazing. We have tons of we have different like styles of tests. We have different ways to run them. We have all this different stuff. Tons of work went into making it, and maybe that's just partially because NeoVim is like trying to maintain compatibility with Vim on some stuff like literally forever, right? So there's some other requirements that are different. But man, every time I did a PR and a random test broke, it was my fault. It was not the other test. It was not the snapshot tests. It was nothing else. Like random stuff. I mean, maybe it's just because NeoVim's also like a really old C project. So you like change something and then a random global is destroyed, or I don't know, it's like whatever. It's maybe not always the best, but like, so I don't, in my experience where people like actually cared about it and like cared to maintain snapshots and make those happen, like no one's even getting paid to work on NeoVim. You know what I'm saying? And like the snapshots were valuable, the unit tests are valuable, the functional tests were valuable, and I used them in a ton of different PRs and across like really large refactors, adding Lua to auto commands, like doing lots of different stuff where I had to change tons and tons of the code. I was just wrong every time until the test went green.
I think that probably goes to show that tests are as valuable as the people who wrote them.
I was literally gonna say that.
Yeah, that's what
The
I've been
word for
waiting to
word?
say too, is I just wanted to say, but since I've been lagging, I didn't want to yell. I just wanted to yell skill issue to everything Trash has been saying.
I would disagree.
dare you.
Actually, I will defend Trash.
Yes!
Okay.
Actually,
Casey's smarter than you.
because here's the thing.
That's true, dang it.
I suspect that some of what you're seeing, though, is not so much the skill of the people who did it, although they may have been very skilled. It's more just about when the tests were added. So at least for me,
Yes.
a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go, okay, if I like, let's say I have a bug that I actually work on for a day. Like this is because most bugs are like, oh yeah, I know what it is, and you just fix it, right? But you
Yep.
get one and you're just like, what the hell is happening? And you actually, it's like that once every few months where you're just like, okay, this is really weird and I'm not sure what it is. When I find those, I typically try to add a test or assertions or whatever I think would have caught it. right? Because I'm like, okay, this one's nasty, and I wasn't expecting it. What can I add that will trip this kind of thing up? And I'll add it. And I suspect that much of what gets seen in like mature products like NeoVim are just like, hey, if you've got some post-test discipline, like after we made the product, when we're finding bugs, we add the test that would have caught the bugs. Those are often very good because they come out of what are the things that are likely to break when we do stuff, and we put in a net there to catch them. And so those are like very good, and they're the opposite of TDD. They're like, oh, they're TDD. They're test-driven debugging. Maybe you could say, or something like that. But so I do think there's something to that that's a lot more. I had a couple other hot takes that I'll get to in a second, but I just wanted to leave it. I wanted to say that one based on what Tej was saying. I don't know if that's true about NeoVim, but I might suspect it, right?
It definitely is. The thing though that like I was more pushing back on is like I find the snapshot tests in NeoVim invaluable. They're amazing. I find a bunch of these good end-to-end tests, truly end-to-end, like literally it runs a test and does user, I don't know if I just dropped, it does like user input and then asserts the outputs, right? Like I found those super valuable in NeoVim. Probably just dropped.
Yeah.
I also, no, you didn't drop. We heard your point. I think also to put on top of it is think about the horizon of NeoVim versus you starting up a new dev tool at work. And maybe there's something to be said about when are the Goldens introduced during exploration phase, or like NeoVim's just not going to be changing. My assumption is that a lot of NeoVim doesn't change super hard. It's not like, hey guys, let's do a whole new data model today.
Wrong.
Changes
That's
all the time.
That's all the ones that everything you guys have poo-pooed on that I found them the most valuable. When I changed literally the entire data model and how all auto commands work all inside of NeoVim, it was the most useful to have the snapshot tests then.
I mean, your testing is going to depend greatly on what you're building, 100%.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. But I'm just saying, like, we were fundamentally changing the data models.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I'm just saying. That's what happened. Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty smart statement. Come on!
You're really smart, Trash.
I wouldn't poo-poo that. I wouldn't poo-poo that at all. You've noticed I have not pooed snapshot testing.
True. Good job, Casey.
Again,
I love you. You're smarter than Trash.
I love that I'm not getting dunked on.
Can we start rearranging the windows based on who Tej thinks is smartest at any given time? And I'm guessing that it has a very high correlation to who is agreeing with him. It seems like I'm getting that sense.
No, I'll just always put Trash at the end. It's fine, Casey. You don't have to worry.
Today I'm going to tweet that Casey protected me from Tej.
Yes.
And this is a pinnacle moment of my career.
I can't even see your guys' videos, so I have no idea what's happening. I'm talking to a black screen right now.
Yeah.
Dude, I've been just cracking up at your feed this whole time. I just can't handle it.
It's pretty good. It's very good. Like, the result is top-notch of the feed.
Unfortunately, I think this will be a stream-only feature. I don't know if TJ will actually have this effect on the video because Riverside will be uploading it.
That's true. Oh, yeah, that's true. He'll still be in weird, like, in his profile, his dating site profile pic phase, but it will be much smoother, yeah. So anyway, I wanted to add I would agree that snapshot testing can be good. It just depends on whether those snapshots are going to be stable. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you have, I would imagine what Prime and Trash were talking about is if you're trying to do snapshot testing at a level below something that's actually consistent across the refactor, obviously that's not going to work, right? And so if your snapshot testing is like someone mentioned a parse tree, well, if it's a parse of something that could be parsed different ways